Everybody ready to get started here? Are we already going and we're live? Awesome. Well then. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today is Tuesday, November 12th, 2024, and this is the regular meeting for the Litchfield Elementary School District Governing Board. I hereby call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is going to be the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please stand and join us. Thank you. We will now take a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. And next, we are actually going to do the Star Spangled Banner will be played by our LTH band led by Mr. Corey Mosman. If everyone
If we could,
please
everybody,
stand.
yes. And remove your hats, please. That was great, great. That's a great way to start off as we'll be celebrating our veterans. There. How about one more round of applause for these outstanding students? Band director Corey Mosman, thank you. You're doing a great job with the students there at LTH.
And with that, we are going to move on to our recognitions and celebrations, and this will be done by Executive Director Nuanez.
Thank you, Madam President, Governing Board Member, Superintendent Davidson, fellow cabinet members, and guests both present and online. On behalf of the entire LESD community, we extend our deepest gratitude to our military veterans for their courage, their service, and dedication to our country and to our school district. Today and every day, we honor those who have sacrificed in the name of freedom and who have served as steadfast protectors of our nation's values. In LESD 79, we are privileged to have veterans among our staff, families, and community members who bring unique perspectives, strength, and leadership to our schools. Their selfless service inspires us to embrace our shared mission to educate, uplift, and prepare the next generation of leaders. We are profoundly grateful for the many contributions of our veterans. Whether in classrooms, support roles, or at home, they continue to make a difference in the lives of our students, embodying the same commitment and resilience that defined their time in the armed forces. Now I would like to read the names of our veterans. From Barbara Roby, Brianna Haro, Zach Dominguez, Corte Sierra Elementary, Shawanda Randolph, James T. Norman, Ebenine Johnson. From the District and Support Services, Eric Stone, Verana Bailey, Thomas Foster de Oro, Carl Brown, Hector Acosta. From Litchfield Elementary School from the elementary school, kind of just rolls right off my tongue there with the district. Vanessa Roller, Rebecca Rogers, Crystal Beckett, L. Thomas Heck, Renee Newsom, Miranda Borja, Mabel Pageant, Sahira Espinosa, Rancho Santa Fe, Miriam Wilson, Paula Lovejoy, Chris Brown, Verado Elementary School, Brianna Fanning, Verado Heritage Elementary School, Lisa DeBoard, Valerie Goldsworthy, Verado Middle School, Brittany Matthias, Linda Aguilar, Wigwam Creek Middle School, Cynthia Rockwell, Anthony Hoover, Jose Oliver Garcia, Sandy Reyes, Western Sky Middle School, Francisco Moreno, Antoinette Chavez, Art Aragon, Deanna Leiden. From Transportation, Jose Alvarez, Mark Chavez, David Curtis, Robert Sines, Deanna Quirk, Eric Cousins, Randy Reichen, David Pelsick, Bill Hunsiker, and from Facilities, Robert Sparks, and to all of you as your fellow veteran, myself as well, I am honored to have with all of you. And this is actually a very special moment for me because I've shared this story with other people, but had it not been for the sacrifice of my best friend, I would not be standing here speaking to you all tonight. Okay. Who do we have? Veterans? Would we like to take a picture? Yeah. Any veterans that were able to make it tonight? There, come on up. Thank you all for your service again. Oh, wait, we have one more celebration recognition, but I'll wait until President Zaidama makes it back up. All right, we'd like to finish up our celebration and recognitions with one last one, very important one. So tonight, we are pleased to recognize and welcome our newly appointed governing board members who will begin their terms in January of 2025. Current board member and president, Melissa Zaidama. Current board member, Michelle Wallace. And along with incoming member, Scott Mikes, they will bring a wealth of knowledge, dedication, and commitment to the student, staff, and the families of our district. Your leadership and the vision will be invaluable as we work together to support our schools and continue providing an exceptional education experience for every student. We look forward to a very collaborative and productive term ahead because, as I always like to say, hashtag together we can. Would we like, Scott, would you like to come up and say a few words? As the incoming newbie, well, the rite of passage, here we go.
Hi, good evening. Thanks for recognizing me today. I'm excited to get started hitting the ground running with the board in January. Just a quick little bit about me. I'm just up the road, been in Litchfield Park for a number of years. Both my girls have gone through the Litchfield Elementary School District, and I have one at Agua Fria now. I was a previous school teacher, administrator, soccer coach. So I have a good experience within the any grades between 6 and 12 is where I spent most of my years. So, but anyways, that's just a little bit about me. I'm excited to get started, and thank you very much.
Do we need to do a picture really quick before we move on? Okay, let's go. No big speech. I just wanted to say thank you to the community that keeps trusting me to be on this board. And I'm excited with our new members that are coming in. I think that we are going to be able to do some great things as a team. So I'm very looking forward to working with everybody. So, Michelle, you're good? Okay, cool. Then we are going to move on to our next item on the agenda, which is public requests to speak. Today we have 3. Before we do that, we haven't had one in a while. I'm going to read this little legal blurb for everyone. Pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes ARS 38-431.01H, this agenda item provides an open call to the public, allowing individuals to address the governing board on any issue within the jurisdiction of the board. Items not listed on the agenda may be brought to the governing board's attention under this section of the agenda. Due to the Arizona open meeting law, the governing board cannot discuss or take any action on items not listed on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, response to public comment about matters not appearing on the agenda will be limited to individual board members who may ask staff to study the matter, respond to any criticism, or ask that the matter be put on a future agenda for further consideration and decision at a later date. Please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, and no more than 30 minutes will be devoted to the public comment portion of the agenda. When you approach the podium, please state your name for the record. Our first speaker is going to be Mr. Mike Finnegan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Finnegan. At the last school board meeting, I was home watching it on video. And the problem with chronic absenteeism is something that came up and cued my interest. I know in 2020, public schools made a decision to close the schools for a year. And after that year, the following 2 years, the graph was shown where absenteeism has skyrocketed. It's a serious problem, and I'm surprised that even after 2 years, it's just now being brought up from as far as I can tell, for the first time. I think a team of administrators and parents need to be created and held accountable for addressing this problem. This problem is ideal for the SMART goal approach, where goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. It must also examine the present levels of absenteeism, which extend far beyond the threshold of 18 days and 5 days unexcused. You have to find out, are the same students chronically absent each year? And I think the Hanover 10 analysis will be an excellent tool for providing these types of answers. And how many school days have students been missing over the last 3 years? How many, and who are the repeat offenders? This absenteeism is not a challenge that school leaders can face on their own. Parents play a critical role with this problem. Some board members questioned if the parents were aware of these things. I think from what I've seen, 82% of parents do not think their child is missing too much school. And I'm wondering, after the 31 early release Wednesdays that you've instituted, could this be contributing to a lazy parental concern about absenteeism? I do believe the parents do not believe their kids are missing that much school, even though they may be at the 18-day limit. I was learned of a new acronym called CUTS. Seems like that's one that should be added to the website that deals with truancy, which is unexcused absences. So you have two major kinds of absences. And these two types of problems call for two types of interventions. I mean, soft absences or excused absences, medical related absences, learning disabilities, mental anxiety, depression. They just need to be treated softly. Hard, unexcused absences like oversleeping, bored, or uninterested, or 19 or more excused or unexcused absences is breaking state law. These need to be dealt more severely. But you guys need to really get a handle on this problem. And I'll be watching and interested to see some SMART goals and results in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Finnegan. Our next speaker is going to be, Shelley Smith.
Hello, I'm Shelley Smith, and I'm with a Little Drama and After School Theater Arts program. And I'm here with Miss Betsy. She is has her business is at Color Wheels, which is an after-school arts program, 3D art. And I'm just here to report the results of our partnership with the district's Title I schools. This partnership was to offset the new $20 an hour classroom fee. And I'd like to thank Jennifer Benjamin for facilitating this. I know you worked really hard putting this all together, so I want to thank you for doing that. So, and I'm teaching at Rancho Santa Fe and where else? Corte Sierra, and Miss Betsy's at yes, and so it's I've never been to those two schools, and it's wonderful. The students are having fun, and the teachers and the principals have given us both great feedback. And I feel it would be beneficial for the district and our programs to continue this partnership in the future. So I'm just hoping that that is something that we can do, and is helping us financially as well. So I want to, again, thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Our next speaker is going to be Betsy Etchart.
Hi there, I am Betsy Etchart of Color Wheels, and I'm here also to thank you for that opportunity to go into the Title I schools. Jennifer, it's been a wonderful way to reach a lot of students, like up to 110 a day. Shelley and I are concerned though that the facility fees will double again next year. And I have a few questions about that. In the June meeting of this year, board members and Mr. Vaughn discussed studying the cost of us using a classroom versus the cost of field maintenance. And we would like to know how that study is progressing and the results of any findings. My second question is I'm estimating there are about 30 fields in the district and maybe roughly 300 regular classrooms. A supply and demand suggests that classrooms should be priced at a lower hourly rate than fields. The potential revenue from classroom rentals far exceeds that of fields. If the district wants to turn classroom facility fees into a significant revenue stream to offset facility maintenance costs, should effort not go into attracting renters to these rooms rather than raising the rental fee for the few of us that make use of them? My third question is, at the June meeting, also, we were advised that we could become nonprofits as there's a greater chance that the $20 an hour facility fee will not be raised for nonprofits next year. Nonprofits still charge tuition. They still have to pay their employees. They still have to buy materials. And I'd like to know how our obtaining nonprofit status makes a difference to the district. My last question is, can you please update us on the ongoing discussions about the potential fee increases? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vaughn, can you? Thank you. Okay, we are going to move on to the adoption of the agenda and consideration of the consent agenda. I'll go through and see if anybody has any items they wish to pull from consent. Ms. Clymer?
I do not, thank you.
Ms. Moran?
I do not, thank you.
Ms. Wallace?
I do not.
Mr. Owens?
I do not.
I don't either. So if someone would like to make a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I second.
Having a motion from Ms. Moran and a second from Mr. Owens, I'll call for the vote. Ms. Clymer?
Yay.
Ms. Moran?
Yay.
Ms. Wallace?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
I'm also a yay. Motion passes. As we have no action items, we're going to move right into our discussion items. There's quite a lot of them tonight. So we will start off with the operational fund balances and reserves presentation. This is going to be by CFO Vaughn.
Thank you. Is this on? Okay. Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Davidson, colleagues and community, thank you for joining us tonight to discuss the district's fund balances and reserves coming into our current school year. Tonight's presentation aligns with the district's strategic keystone for resources. The district utilizes a best practice risk-based approach published by the Government Finance Officers Association on proper reserve levels for state and local governments. This is important because it helps ensure that we balance having too much in reserve to not having enough. We have this approach also worked into the governing board policy that will be effective as of July 1st of the coming year. The risk-based approach has governments analyze risk factors over many different areas as shown on the slide. The risk factors that have the most impact on our need for reserves is the risk of extreme events such as fiscal cliffs and the aggregate expenditure limit. Great examples of how reserves help in those instances is our current handling of the expiration of ESSER funds. For the current year, we were able to make the decision to spread over both this year and next year to balance the budget after the ESSER funds expired. This allows us to take a more mindful approach to balancing the budget than if we had to balance it all at once because we didn't have the reserves to handle overspending for a short period of time. We also have to be prepared to handle shocks to our revenue as it relates to current year funding. If enrollment is not where it was projected to be for the year, we can avoid making mid-year cuts because we have the emergency funds available and ready to deploy. We also have over 100 full-time equivalent positions covered by federal funds and less stable funding sources than M&O. If these revenue sources did not materialize, our reserves would be prepared to step in to protect those jobs in the short term. It's also important to consider the potential impact of a recession on K-12 funding in Arizona. This slide shows the inflation-adjusted base support level, or funding per student, for each year from 2002 to the present. We can see the large dip which occurred around the 2008 recession, but we can also see how our purchasing power has continued to decline in the last several years. This has a significant impact as we enter into our next discussion around the budget context for the coming budget. We simply have decreasing purchasing power compared to what we had in the past. Can you hear me now? All right. All in favor? All right. These next two slides look at specifically how we calculate our reserves and our reserves targets. Summarized, we calculate our recurring revenue that we have available to use to sustain district operations, people, and programs, and take a percentage of that as recommended by the GFOA. We compare those targets to the balances.
Mr. Vaughn, can I have you pause just a moment? I want to see if we can fix the mic because it's a little hard to understand all the things.
Sure. No. Me talking help tested? Do you need me to talk to? I do appreciate you stopping us before we get too deep into it. Now, okay.
Much better.
Would you like me to go back a couple of slides or what's the preference?
We're okay where we're at. Just-
Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely. We ready to jump back in? Okay. So we compare those targets to the balances we have in funds without substantial legal restriction, which would allow us to target the use of those funds if needed. And those funds are what's shown on the slide. With all of this analysis, our targets are between 3 and 4 months emergency fund, which may sound fairly similar even to recommendations you hear about your personal finances and prudent emergency funds for your household. This slide is actually a slide from my presentation in October on the AFR, but what it shows is that we ended the fiscal year 2024 with just slightly over 4 months of an emergency fund. So right where we effectively want to be towards the top end of the target. At this point, before we move on to additional budget context, I'm available to answer any questions you might have specifically on our reserves. In the next presentation, we will look at where I expect we'll end this year and continue to talk about what that means for our reserves. But if there's any questions around our methodology for the reserves, I'm happy to answer that now.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any questions?
I don't have any questions necessarily, but I think just reiterating that I'd love to see us closer to the 30% number than the top. I mean, it's fantastic that we have savings for sure. We've always been very conservative for good reason because we feel like when we need it, we want to make sure it's there. But I'd like to see us get down to that middle number just because there are things that we potentially might not do or might not engage in thinking that we have, not enough funding. So thank you.
Ms. Moran?
I will have more commentary during the discussion section of the next, when we're talking about the budget themselves. For me, this presentation being within the guardrails of the parameters that we set as a board tells me that this portion of the presentation looks good to me.
Ms. Wallace?
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Owens?
Yeah, kind of like a hybrid between those two, I think, based on what we see next presentation, but I do also want to be close to 30, but I know what you're going to tell us next presentation answers those questions.
I was going to say that as my comment. I feel like you're going to address that in our next presentation. So I don't have any questions. So we can move on to the next presentation. So yeah, we're going to talk about the fiscal year 2026 budget timeline and context. This will be also by CFO Vaughn because we talk money all the time now. And so it's the CFO Vaughn show for the rest of the year.
All right. Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Davidson, colleagues and community, thank you for joining us tonight to discuss the district's budget context for the 2025-2026 school year. Tonight's presentation aligns with the district's strategic keystone for resources. We will start tonight by providing background information, talking through where it looks like we will end this year's budget. We'll then discuss some strategic initiatives in the forecast period and the state's budget position as well. We will discuss two scenarios for the current school year because at this point in the year, both scenarios are equally as likely. one where we end the year overspending our M&O revenues by $1 million, and one where we end up overspending our M&O revenues by $2 million. You might recall, because this isn't the first budget cycle for most of you, that this isn't how I typically start the budget process. I typically look at how we ended our spending last year and use that as a starting point. The reason I've deviated from that approach this year is the substantial changes to the staffing model that we engaged in for the current year. And so it wouldn't be an accurate starting point for us to be working off of. In the next several slides, we will cover a multi-year projection similar to what we've seen in the past under both scenarios going out to fiscal year 2028, 2029 to help us make decisions around what we should target for our upcoming budget. Similar to in prior years, we will review recurring revenues to expenses as well as the impact on our reserves. Prior to moving into the numbers, it's important to point out that I've continued to assume a 2% raise per year for illustrative purposes, just so we do have something in there. This slide shows the year-over-year projection under scenario 1, comparing revenues to expenses. We can see under this scenario at the bottom of the slide, that last row, that it shows $1 million of overspending in the current year compared to revenues. And without any additional changes is projected to be $2 million per year by the end of the projection period. This slide shows the impact of that projected overspending on our reserves. This slide shows that we do have excess reserves to support this overspending through fiscal year 2027, 2028. However, we would be below our midpoint target for the reserves by the end of the projection period. We will dig deeper into what this means for our budget after looking at scenario 2. This is scenario 2, where the only real difference is we start with the current year ending with $2 million of excess spending over revenues. We can see in this case, by the end of the projection period, we would be overspending M&O revenues by $3 million. Under this scenario, we would spend through all excess reserves by 2026, 2027, and be below our midpoint target by 2026, 2027. And in fact, in that last year, you can even see in the bottom right-hand corner that we would be below even our lowest target for reserves if this were to all come to fruition. Bringing these two scenarios together, we can see that we're projected to overspend by $1.5 to $2 million next year without any changes in our financial operations and run out of excess reserves by 2026 or 2027. What this suggests is that we do have excess reserves in the short term to support this excess spending, which is why we're not presently concerned. However, we are in a position where we need to balance the budget by 2027 or 2028 school year at the latest. However, with some of the strategic initiatives we have on the horizon, our recommendation would be to plan to have a net reduction in M&O spending by $1.5 to $2 million for the next school year. We have two major initiatives on the horizon, which are likely to require us to spend our excess reserves. The opening of School 17 will have an uncertain impact on our M&O spending due to operating additional square footage. However, the largest concern requiring the spend down of our excess reserves is the repurposing of the L. Thomas Heck campus. If the plan remains being opening a magnet school at that campus, it will need to be supported by reserves until a level of profitability is reached. This is a significantly risky endeavor from a financial perspective due to the open enrollment rules that the district would have to follow when gaining enrollment for the magnet school. Namely, any student who lives in our boundaries who would like to attend the school would have to be accepted before any outside students are enrolled. While this would be fair,
It would not generate any additional revenue for the district to help cover the cost of operating the magnet school. As a result, we would need to staff the magnet school to such a level that you could accept all internal transfers and hopefully enough external students to help pay for the cost of running the campus. What scenario 1 and 2 shows us is that without cuts in the coming year, there are not true excess reserves to support this initiative. Instead, we would be potentially approaching our lowest reserve target or even below it, and not really have those excess reserves to help support the magnet school. With those factors in mind, it would be my recommendation to target $1.5 million in reduced spending for the 2025-2026 school year. This will approach a structurally balanced budget while protecting against cutting more than is necessary given uncertainties in the projections. Having looked at our local context, we can broaden our outlook just a moment to the state level. We monitor what's happening with the state budget to try to have an understanding of what we might be facing in the future. The aggregate expenditure limit is always something school districts have to watch. This is a limit in the Arizona Constitution, which limits how much districts as a whole across the state can spend, regardless of the funding actually available. We're happy to report that this issue has been resolved for the current year, but is still a concern into the future. Similar to our budget situation, the state is also expecting budget shortfalls for 2027 and 2028, depending on certain projections. What this tells us is that we should not expect significant increased resources from the state over our projection horizon. Last but not least, we also are watching the phase out or potential phase out of Prop 123 funding, which would result in loss of some of the district's capital funding if not addressed in the coming legislative session. Along with the potential loss of revenue, we also have to be mindful of certain triggers to our funding added by Prop 123. Namely, if the Arizona Department of Education becomes certain percentages of the state's spending, the district's inflation funding could be cut. It's projected that ADE will hit this percentage in fiscal year 2026, which would mean our inflation funding for 2027 could be at risk at the option of the state legislature. All this to say, we do not anticipate our budget shortfalls will be addressed by new funding from the state. As we've already begun working on next year's budget, we have identified through talking with employees, through employee chats by human resources and the finance team, apple pie tours, and other feedback sessions, several priorities for the coming budget. These are shown on the slide, including ensuring we have the best benefits we can offer employees, considering our budget constraints, through our benefits procurement process, which is currently ongoing. Beyond benefits, we will also be reviewing if a potential restructuring of our performance pay systems to provide more compensation and biweekly paychecks would be beneficial to our employees and our competitiveness in the labor market, and review if longevity-based compensation would be appropriate, as well as continuing our practice of compensation studies to continue to target competitive compensation. Our budget timeline looks fairly similar to what it's been in the past, with some exciting exceptions we will cover. Tonight, we are talking about the budget reserves, timeline, and context. In January, we will discuss the compensation study results, provide an update on our benefits work, some budget recommendations to begin considering, work calendars, and contract language. In February, we will continue discussing the potential budget initiatives and bring preliminary benefits package to the board to consider. In March, we will bring the projected budget for approval and are targeting a contract issuance shortly after March 15th, with raises and compensation changes reflected on the contract. We hope this provides an increased level of transparency our employees have been asking for when they're considering signing their contract for the next year.
Executive Director Satterfield and I are available to answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any questions?
I had one question on slide 11. It looks like, I think it was mentioned on the one above it. It says strategic initiatives in the interim could put a strain on the reserves. Can you describe what those initiatives are?
Yeah, so that's what I was referring to was the repurposing of LTH and the opening of School 17. So the costs of operating that additional square footage for School 17, and then the potential of effectively staffing the magnet school, but it may or may not generate revenue to support that staffing.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I thought that it was in addition to those things. I didn't realize that was inclusive. Thank you. That was my only question.
Ms. Moran?
Yes, I have a few questions. My first comment is that I am in agreement with Board Member Clymer about us being less conservative with our reserves. I understand the long-term goal of balancing the budget, but my primary concern right now is our current students and utilizing the dollars that we have to make sure that we are doing the most for them. As we know, we had to cut some things because of ESSER. I would prefer that we hit the 30% target and bring back some supports that are going to impact current student success than make a decision now based on an awful lot of what ifs. There are a lot of what ifs in these scenarios. So in all my years of doing this, we've never overspent what our revenue targets were. We've always been very conservative. And that is actually a regret of mine, because I would rather we utilize those funds and have to come back at some point if we actually did overspend and make those hard choices. Because I feel like we continue to be conservative and we're not utilizing what we've got to the best of our abilities. So where that takes me then, based on what was included in this presentation, is the repurposing of LTH something we actually want to do? How long is it going to take us to recoup those costs? And if they may or may not be recouped, should we be doing that? I understand the funding, and I guess let me phrase this as a question. So can you explain how the funding for a new school and those students and the shuffling of those students works versus a magnet school?
So part of the problem really is there isn't a distinction. And so if the magnet school, for example, just pulled students from our other campuses, there would be no increase in funding, but there would be the cost of the increased staff. That is my concern. And I agree with you that we need to be looking at, is this really the direction we want to go with the Altama's campus? And we are starting to look at, is that really the direction we want to go? Because there are other options that are substantially less risky. Because you're funded on a per student overall for the district basis, the only way that the magnet school generates additional revenues is either it pulls students from other districts through open enrollment, or the other way that it could is if it entices families who would otherwise send their kids to our schools but have chosen other options to come back. So you would truly need to see a overall increase in students for the whole district for it to generate revenue. And because even though it wouldn't have a boundary, it would still be required to follow all of the same open enrollment regulations. That's what I meant by we would truly have to take all of the internal transfer requests before taking any of those students that may actually generate more funding for us. And so, frankly, the way the school finance funding is
calculated by the state is just not friendly to this type of initiative, even though it very well may be the right thing to do to try to expand how many students we're educating that maybe should be ours or may like to be ours.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. So what I think might be impacting right now is the timing of School 17 and the magnet.
Mhm.
So School 17, as we know, is from a business finance break-even standpoint, grossly underutilized. We are losing money on School 17 right now.
Mhm.
The intention is that when we build when the new building is finished and all of that, that will not be the case. But I think having to make that up with our staffing model right now, and then adding an untested, unproven model of a magnet school might be too much in the 2, 3, 4 year kind of timeframe that we have coming up. Any other thoughts on that, or anything missing there, CFO Vaughn?
Not other than I agree. I think your thinking is correct there. There's just a lot of risk in that combination of potential activities that if that really is the direction we want to go, you really would need substantial reserves to support that, because it wouldn't surprise me, for example, if the magnet school spent $1 million plus each year of reserves just to keep going. I mean, if you think just about how new businesses are when they get started, you don't tend to make money the first several years you're operating. And so it's not a foreign concept, but it is a fairly foreign concept in the world of K-12 education, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense. My last comment is going to be on the level of aggressiveness, I guess, on spending, when we look at being conservative in spending our reserves versus actually spending down our reserves. We had the ESSER funds, those are gone. We are kind of rebalancing things from an instruction standpoint. We're looking at, all the different things that are impacting. We're obviously going to look at the school grades later as well. And I'm just going to reiterate, I don't want to see us sitting on funds that could be spent where we could readjust down the road, because we don't know what the assumptions are really going to play out in 27, 28, 29. I want to make sure that we're servicing the kids that we have now. So if we can somehow bridge the gap, use some of those funds to help with the resources that we might need, if we have determined that losing some of those positions that came from ESSER really are critical to student success, then looking at maybe being able to fund some of those and dip into that a little bit more.
May I go back to a slide?
Yes.
So if we look at what the reserves might do, and maybe it's actually better that I go to this one just so that we can see both scenarios. It is possible to, if you will, kick this can down the road a little bit, because as you stated, there are many assumptions, especially as you go further out into the projection. But also, really, the reason it's primarily concerning me, you're exactly on point, is because of the magnet school on the horizon, the thought of trying to get that going for several years. The spend down of the reserves may not be anywhere near as concerning if we didn't have that item on the horizon. Because if you look at the numbers as it currently sits, we should be okay through the end of next year with excess reserves, or the end of even the year following, depending on which scenario becomes closer to reality.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. The other thing for me is it seems like each percentage point is basically worth $1 million when we look at this, at the reserves. And so, yeah, I guess I would rather, knowing that 30% is our target, I would rather just us be more aggressive for 1 year and let's just see where that shakes out and make sure that we're doing the most that we can for the students that we have now. I would definitely like to continue the conversations on the magnet school. And, that's something that we really haven't talked about, the real financial risk piece of it. And what does that look like? And what have other districts experienced to be able to make an intelligent decision on that? Because if it really is going to be a multi-year, multi-million-dollar investment to get that going, if we can't get a bond or something else that's going to help us with that, I don't see it being feasible.
Right.
I would love to hear what my fellow board members think.
Ms. Wallace.
I agree with you, Kim. I think that we need to be spending the money that we have now and making our budget now and not for a bunch of what ifs and things that we can't account for later. I guess I hadn't really thought about a magnet school before tonight, and like you were saying, how we have to accept our district's students first, and how I would think a magnet school would really help pull students that are currently in charter schools and different things, like being more of a charter school, but I don't know how many of those students are currently in our district that are in our schools that would go there. I mean, again, that's a what if that, how do we know that? I love the idea of a magnet school and what it could potentially offer our district and our students, but we also need to be able to continue everything that we're currently doing without making more and more cuts to the classrooms that we do have. So it's a hard decision, and I guess something we all have to talk about and think about a lot more.
Mr. Owens.
You mentioned excessive reserve, right? Not like just reserve. So when you say excessive reserve, that's above 30% or 30?
Yeah, it's above that that higher target. And so how we wrote the board policy that will go into effect July 1st is that when we have excess reserves as defined in the way I've shown in this presentation, that's when we start having conversations about how to spend those reserves down in a way that won't have too much of a negative impact in the future when we have to cut it. Because the hard thing about excess reserves is it's excess one-time money. It doesn't have a recurring revenue source behind it. And so it's not something that you can necessarily add staff, for example, at least not staff that you're anticipating to continue. It's funding that you could add one-time staff or do one-time projects with, but you don't have a continuing revenue source to
Correct,
continue.
but you got to an excess reserve somehow, right?
Mhm.
So whether it's not a continuous funding source,
Right.
we still managed to save more money every year above what we thought we were going to.
Mhm.
So while we're budgeting for conservatively, which as I appreciate being good stewards of our taxpayer dollars, but I don't want to be cheap for our students.
Sure.
Right? So there's that balance. And I'm not a math. I mean, I think I peaked in like algebra, but like peaked in algebra, but just geometry. But I too would like to see us maximize the spending currently in anticipation of, or not in anticipation, but being willing to make those decisions later, as opposed to sacrificing now. Like, I don't say that right, but Kim said it very well. And then, yeah, what happens? I'm sorry. What happens if school 17 opens and we move all the students over there and we don't have anybody for L. Thomas Heck, like, will that save us money?
Depending on what we do with it, right? There's a lot of money that we would spend even on a vacant building. Just having it exist costs us money. But there are several things we can explore and consider. For example, we could rent it out to, for example, a private day school that provides special education services to our students. That has the potential to do several things for us. One, we could generate rental income. Two, we could save money on transportation because we do send a population of our own students to private day schools. And three, from some of the agreements I've seen in that realm, sometimes they have a reduced tuition rate for the district that they're renting facilities in. So if we did something like that, it has the potential to be a positive financial impact to the district without as much risk, right? And so those are the different options or similar like options that we're considering along with the magnet school concept. But I know it seems like more of the conversation has been around a magnet school to bring students back.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I by no means think that would be an ideal option, right? Because we have staff, we have teachers, right? My goal is to find anything we can do to make sure L. Thomas Heck stays and maintains a viable option and a resource for our students, right? Financially, I think something needs to be presented as what could happen, magnet, non-magnet, whatever it is, right? Because we know where the student population's going, right? It's going to the west side of the 303. And so we've already been able to move everybody from L. Thomas Heck for the most part, or transition them out, bring in school 17 over the next few years, and eventually they're going to leave. So all those students are going to have someplace else to go. So we're going to have to backfill them. It's either going to be a magnet or I don't know what else it would be.
I mean, at that point, wouldn't we be almost ready to rezone again just because of the growth in this area? I mean,
Is there any growth in
We're-
the L. Thomas Heck area though? By that in 3 years, will there be enough to repurpose it to
I'm not
back
saying-
to a middle school?
I'm not saying there's growth there, but there's growth everywhere in the West Valley in our
Yeah,
district,
everything's
so.
west of the 303. That's the problem right now.
But we could implement a program, for example, and I'm not saying this is what we should do, but just to give you an idea, if we were to, let's say, decide we're going to continue the traditional academy, move the traditional academy to Heck, and then that would open up spaces in our other schools to take on more open enrollment. So that would just be different from the magnet in that we're trying to get the open enrollment to come to the magnet. It would be a different way of dispersing that. So again, I think there's a lot of conversations that we can have going forward about that.
I'm not a proponent of that personally. I feel like that removes students from their home school, their neighborhood school, to move them. Just magnet, I think is different. Magnet's maybe like a choice where, you should be able to be in an advanced accelerated course on your home campus, in my opinion, and not have to be bused or shuttled. But again, it's a bigger conversation. I know Dr. Davidson had the mic and wanted to talk for a little bit and chime on this. So
Thank you. Well, perhaps you can hear me, but hey, thank you for the conversation. And certainly we just have to be reminded that the conversation regarding the repurpose of the LTH is one of my board approved goals. And so hopefully this Friday, you'll be getting some information on just some things that our team have been working on behind the scenes to help support that conversation. At the end of the year, our goal was not to tell or even ask the board to say this is exactly where we're going, but we should have a game plan in place that'll guide us over that next year and a half if we choose to do something different. Great conversation, but I think we'll further this conversation more in December, as well as we move through the goals for the remainder of the year. But a lot of variables, and thank you for the conversation, and as well as on the budget. So, thank you.
So I don't really have any specific questions. I think they kind of got answered with everybody else. I wish, to be honest, that we had talked about the financial side about Thomas Heck before we talked about turning it into a magnet school. Not that I'm opposed to that idea still, but I do feel like that's going to be a broader, bigger conversation that we're going to have as a board. And there's so many questions I have that I will not bring up tonight. I feel like that's for a different conversation. But I agree that I want to spend our money on our students we have right now. And that may not look like adding new positions, but maybe it means cutting less positions because we already did cut stuff last year. And we're going to talk about grades, which have nothing to do with those cuts that we made, right? And so now we've made cuts and there's different programs available, and we may feel like we wish we weren't doing that this year now. So I just hope that we can be a little more open to spending some of that reserve now and helping our students right now, because these students deserve to get everything that they should have and be successful, and we shouldn't just save it for the future kids also.
President Zaidema, can I have a follow-up question? For CFO Vaughn, you said in our new board policy, I know this doesn't take effect until next year, but in the new board policy that it states when our excess reserves is over the upper limit. It's not over the target limit. So I don't think that truly addresses what we're all saying, which is the difference between 30 and 34% is millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. So we're saying we're only going to spend it down if it's 36%, which is way over our target. So I guess, and again, this is going to be for the board and the new board member to do, but I just wanted to at least have that thought out there. I think what we're all saying is we want to spend the money that we have now as best we can. And if we're considering the excess to be over our upper limit, I would suggest that this board go back and look at what that upper limit is. Maybe that upper limit is 32% or 33% versus 34, just because if we're going to keep the policy to that measure, then we're still millions of dollars in excess of what our target is before we even talk about spending it down.
I wrote that down for us to potentially review
Okay.
that policy again and consider if we need to make changes.
Well, perfect. And last, just to make one comment on L. Thomas Heck, again, I won't be here to make this decision, but in my professional life, marketing and branding and sort of people's perceptions of things is what I do all day long. So one caution I will give to the board and to administration is, if you change L. Thomas Heck, if you open it as a day school, if you close it down, if you do something that is significantly different, one of the problems we have right now that led to maybe not as much success in that school as we wanted to is people's perception of what is happening at that school. And if you open it as a day school or you open it as something significantly different that people do not perceive as good or helpful or beneficial for that space, it is going to be years for you to change that perception if and when you decide to close it and open a magnet school or reinvigorate L. Thomas Heck as a K-8 or a middle school or whatever is needed at that time. So I just implore you to really think about the community's perception of that school, because we already have an issue with that now. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the students that go there, the staff that teach them, or any of that. It's the community's perception of what has happened there. And so I just want us to be really careful when making those decisions that, whether it's short, mid-range, or long-term planning, that we have an availability to really think about changing hearts and minds, because we have a unique opportunity right now to do that. We have a clean slate, hopefully, once School 17 is settled, to do that with L. Thomas Heck. So just be careful that those choices are, make sure to involve the community and things like that, because I think they'll have a pretty large bearing on the success of that place once it reopens in terms of the Litchfield School District.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for the feedback tonight. This has been incredibly helpful. Since it was part of the agenda around fund balance, I will share that the upper limit that's in that policy is 32.5%. So.
Did anyone have any other questions before we move on to the next item? Okay. We are going to move on then to the first read of Trust Model Policy, Chapter 3, Part 2. And this is going to be by Everyone.
Everyone. President Zinema, governing board members, we're going to go through lots of chapter 3 here. Please stop us if you want us to spend a little more time in depth over them, as there are a lot. Pause on the mic. Does this sound okay? We start with 3-201 facilities. This is basically the superintendent and the authority of the governing board to control and manage facilities in many different ways. It's the sale and the lease of properties, the construction and maintenance of new or current properties, the adequacy standards that come from the SFOB, the School Facilities Oversight Board, and then closing of a school, along with the advertising of it. This aligns with what we've had in the past. The verbiage is very similar, and we recommend no changes on 3-201. Not too fast? Okay.
Wait, hold on before you go. So are we going to go through every single one of them, even if they're accept as is? Or are we only reviewing the ones where there's recommended changes?
I was gonna not ask if anybody had questions unless they had recommended changes, unless you want to, like, somebody can jump in and say, hey, hold on, if they want to do that. Is that work for everybody rather than us have to go through everyone every time?
Okay, I guess my question is like, for the one that he just went through, there are no changes, but I mean, we still went through all of it. Are we going to do that for every single one of them, or only the one that the district is recommending change? Do you understand what I mean?
We don't have to. Does everybody want us to just speed this along and just jump to the ones they want changes?
I
I'm
don't
fine
think
with
it's
that.
about speeding it along. I'm just, if we're not recommending any changes and we didn't come prepared to ask for any changes, I don't know why we would go through every one of them, but everyone else can jump in.
I mean, I'm good with
agree.
us just moving on to the ones that we need to talk about.
Beautiful. We're going to move to 3-202.A. That's facility use, a procedure, facility use, short-term facility. And our recommendation is really just changing the verbiage of the fees to the group types. The prior group types provided by the trust was just called Class 1, Class 2, Class 3 groups. Didn't align with what's in our current handbook, and so we changed the verbiage to match what's in the current handbook, as you can see, to community education partners, nonprofit or governmental youth activities, for-profit youth, governmental entities, and then LESD business and religious gatherings, HOAs, or other adult activities. So really no change to the actual policy itself, except for the determination of groups, but not changing the order of the groups.
Hi, President Zinema, governing board members. The next policy that we'd like to have you review that we'd like to recommend a change to is 3202 .b, procedure for facility use of animals. And specifically, we'd like to add additional requirements that both animals that are brought to school as classroom pets, as well as service animals, are required to be proof of vaccination, that they are free from any type of disease if they're on our campuses. Any questions or comments?
Ms. Clymer,
No?
Ms. Moran,
No.
Ms. Wallace.
I know this may sound like a silly question, but like, what about animals that don't have vaccinations, like hamsters and whatnot? Do we allow those in our classrooms under this?
Under the
curious.
trust policy for classroom pets, there has to be some type of vet clearance.
So no. Okay, no more fish.
Mr. Owens,
No questions.
that's causing me some pause that means they can't have fish. I'm just like, now that she said that, that's causing me a little bit of pause on that.
You know
Has-
what,
has
let
there
me,
been any-
let me review, and so why don't we let the next person go and I will review and come right back to you.
Okay.
And has there been any issues with
Fish?
like class pets or anything like that?
Rabbits.
I mean, I'm assuming somewhere along the way there has been, because some lawyer wrote this in, but I just
What?
mean in our district, has that ever been a challenge for us of people bringing, or, I mean, obviously the unvaccinated, if it's fish or lizards or whatever, but
It's, our prior policy was just that we vetted the animal for any allergies in the classroom. So checking with the nurse to ensure that students that had allergies, that there was provisions, and then principal approval. That was our former policy, but let me, because it does say classroom pets, so.
Well, can you tell me where this came about then? If this wasn't our thing before and it's something you guys want to add, why, where did it come from?
Yeah, so.
It came about because of therapy animals, not necessarily support animals in an IEP, but if we have a teacher who has had therapy dogs, then this just makes sure that we have the proper paperwork, and we never had an actual policy that supported that. So that was where we were thinking, if we have animals that have gone through this process, then we need to have the correct paperwork and the vet paperwork on hand in case needed.
Okay.
Yes, so just looking back at the trust recommendations, it says that, certificate from the veterinarian that the animal is healthy and disease-free. And it specifically speaks to classroom pets. The animal is free from any diseases or parasites.
So for a lizard or fish or whatever, as long as the vet said that they were fine, obviously you don't vaccinate fish, but you could bring them in as long as the vet said that they were okay.
Yes, it doesn't say vaccination. It says that they are vetted by the vet to be disease and parasite-free.
But who's gonna take their fish to the vet? I mean, you buy a 50-cent goldfish and then you gotta pay $50 to the vet? Seriously?
All right, so we're gonna pause on that one and we're gonna bring it back to you next time. Sound fair? We'll bring it back to
Because
the
I was just
attorney.
thinking about like that
Okay.
teacher that had all the fish that came in. It's
Yeah.
like how, I didn't know how that.
And honestly, we made the change to the service animals because we felt if we were asking for fish and lizards to be checked out for a vet, we should be asked for therapy horses or dogs to be checked out by a vet. And that wasn't how the policy read. So we did not think about fish or lizards, so we will bring it back.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I brought that. I, as a former classroom teacher, always had a lizard, fish, and or hamster. So my entire zoo would have been banned. So
Well, fair enough.
With that in mind, I'll take an easier one. We'll move into support services 3-300, specifically 3-302 transportation. And in the eligible students of ridership, we're just removing the language about high school students, as our district does not serve any high school students. And so removing number 2 of eligible students out of the 6 is the recommendation on that one. Any questions? It is a ways down there. So 3-302.
Anyone have any questions? No? Awesome. We can move on.
That is the final one with any changes, but we will bring back class pets.
Well, there is one other one that has to do with volunteers, which is 3-400. I'm trying to find.
3-401.
So basically, we use the same verbiage as the trust policy, and we just delineated between non-custodial volunteers who perform services during the school day or after school, must provide fingerprint clearance or a background check. And then the district shall require all volunteers who may perform services on overnight field trips with students to provide either a fingerprint clearance or a background check. So we just clarified non-custodial because that's our current practice, is that we do a background check or fingerprint clearance, and it's also under statute. And then we also clarified for those overnight experiences that we are requiring our chaperones to have a fingerprint clearance or a background check. And that includes non-custodial and custodial, which typically it's just going to be custodial, which is why we didn't put that in there. But so I'll take any questions.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. Can you clarify? So the third paragraph down, the district shall require all non-custodial volunteers who perform services during the school day to provide fingerprint clearance or a background check.
Or after school.
or after school.
Mm-hmm.
Are we currently doing that?
Yes.
I think there's a lot of people that come and read in a classroom, or PTA members that go and work at book fair or whatever, that do not have a fingerprint clearance card or a background check.
Non-custodial, not our parents that come in to supervise students. So coming in and reading, that's visiting the campus versus volunteering and working with our students.
If you're, I'm sorry, if you're in a classroom and you're reading to a child, that's not considered volunteering?
Visit. Mhm. If you're still in the presence of the teacher and you're reading a book to the class, you're visiting the campus. If you're going to come regularly and read to the kids and pull small groups, then yes.
And
but if
you're saying be alone with students without a teacher present
Yes.
is the differentiating factor there?
Yes.
Okay, understood.
Yep.
Thank you.
So my clarifying question is that after, I understand during the school day, teacher would be present, but after school, so that would be like a coach or
Coaches.
a,
Probably mostly coaches or club, maybe club sponsor.
okay.
Mhm.
So if you're a parent and you're a coach, even if it's after school and there's no supervision, you don't have to have a fingerprint clearance card.
If you are being paid by us, you do have to have a fingerprint clearance card to be a coach.
Okay, so if you're an assistant coach and
And
you're
you-
a parent, you do not have to have a fingerprint clearance card.
You do not.
See, I don't agree with that, because if there isn't a teacher, I guess in that case, you're saying the coach, let's say it's a parent, would have a fingerprint clearance card, but they're not well versed on things to look for, warning signs, they're not the same as a school sanctioned supervisor of students, whether that's a classified or certified staff. So I feel like that could be an area we might want to tighten up a little bit.
Mhm.
Since-
And maybe Sandy, maybe you can speak to that, because I know you have been working with coaches, parents coaching their own child's team, and I know that you are working through some of that as a volunteer, not a paid coach, which a paid coach would be vetted through HR, fingerprint clearance card. But if a parent wants to volunteer their time, not be paid by the district, just help out their child's team, that's an area that maybe Sandy can speak to.
I guess what I would say to that is that we know those that we bring in as employees of the district go through the fingerprint clearance and background check and all of those things. So we know they're okay. But when we get to the part where there's a parent, a custodial parent, or, there at the school, we wouldn't have them have a background check and fingerprint clearance.
I understand that. What I'm saying is
Okay.
I could see there being a scenario where an assistant coach who's not getting paid, but that person who doesn't have a background check would be alone with students.
Okay, but are you meaning a non-custodial parent who's an assistant coach?
I'm meaning even a custodial parent. They're going to be alone with students other than their own child. And that, as a parent,
Mhm.
might cause concern. I could see a scenario that could come up in that way, that we have not vetted that parent who would be potentially in charge of that child.
Mhm. I absolutely see what you're getting at. I'm speaking from the experience I've had, which has been that we have not, wherever I've been, we have not vetted a custodial parent in that way. Not saying that we couldn't do that, but, I think the other side of it too is, we could do our due diligence and process them, get them to have a fingerprint clearance card. I think one of the important things for us to remember too, though, is that as soon as that fingerprint clearance card is processed, or even the background check, that, if they go out and commit a crime the next day, whether it's, against a child or just in general, that we don't have a way that we come to know about that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that we still have a risk there. And I would hope that the risk is less when it's a custodial parent, but I don't believe from my experiences that would be a guarantee in any way.
I will share that we do have a way to fill that gap a little bit, and it's going to be up and running in January, and that's our visitor management system through Centegix. And so one of the things that we are going to do is anyone that comes on campus as a visitor, one-time visit, eat lunch with your kiddo, whatever it is you're there for, or you are a volunteer, you go through our volunteer training, you signed up to volunteer on our campuses, and coaches, and those coaches that are supporting teams will run their driver's license through Centegix. Centegix uses the national database to look for any sexual predators, sexual crimes, and it is up to date. So it could happen, as soon as the arrest is posted, we'll be able to pull that through the national database. So that is something come January. If you are coming on any of our campuses or working with any of our students, your driver's license will be scanned and run through that system.
Okay. That sounds like a step in the right direction. I guess my question maybe for Board Member Clammer, Board Member Zaidama is, doesn't Awafria do background checks on every parent volunteer to go onto their campus?
Yes, I have a little pause on that. I don't know, I don't want to make it too difficult for our parents to be able to come and volunteer at schools. And if we start doing background checks on every single person, you could potentially have people that, for whatever reason, not that they've done anything wrong or whatever, they just, maybe that will not allow them to be able to do that. So I think this is a good balance right now. I do want to know though about our coaches, if they're going to scan IDs and things like that. Is that going to happen when they come to volunteer to help with baseball? Or are they going to just go straight out to the baseball field and they're not going to check in?
Well, what our thought is, we haven't put the process in place yet, because like I said, we're rolling it out in January. But the thought that Director Moss and I had was that, okay, you are signed up to be a volunteer, right? You filled out the volunteer packet, you've gone to the volunteer training, we're talking about a coach, right? So you need to come in one time or periodically and run your driver's license, because they may be showing up after the office is closed, right? So, but we need to arrange a time for them to come in and scan that license, and maybe, schedule it out throughout the season for them to come and run their driver's license and make sure that nothing comes up as far as, on that list from the national database. So.
I think another thing is just training. I mean, as you were saying, just like a parent who's coming in, a one-time visit versus someone who's taking small groups and taking them away from the teacher. I think the training comes, whether it's a teacher or a coach, that you have some responsibility here as a paid employee of the district, that assistant coach or the parent volunteer or whatever does not have this level of access to kids without you being present. Because you're right. I mean, when there's lots of things going on, it could very easily happen that people get, sort of pulled apart and that kind of thing. So I think maybe just addressing that also in training as to, as the person who does have the background check and is being paid as the employee, obviously has a higher level of responsibility to make sure the volunteers that they allow to work with them are being properly supervised.
And isn't it our policy right now in a classroom, volunteers are not supposed to be left alone with students anyways? There should always be an employee that's present. So that should just continue on with our sports and things like that.
Well, but I'm not worried about the classroom during the day, because again, that's a visit. I'm not concerned about lunch. I'm not concerned about those things where there are people around. I'm concerned about after school things or before school things where other people aren't around or aren't as many people around. I mean, I just feel like we're opening ourselves up for holes and liability with those scenarios. And as we know, as we've all experienced in our district and other districts, for whatever reason, coaches seem to be a more susceptible grouping of people who choose to be around children, sometimes for not all the best reasons. So I would prefer that we cover all of our bases when we have that scenario.
So is that something we can look at, potentially anybody that's working with our kids, as a coach, if you're in that role?
President Zaidama and Ms. Moran, good conversation again. We've come a long way, even in my short time here, with the addition of the extra staff member in Mr. Nuanez's department. We've done a lot of work with volunteerism, try to up our standards, make certain that the process is easier through an electronic method. But certainly we aren't perfect. I think what I'd like to do outside of this policy conversation, we'll get back to that, but it sounds like we need to bring to the board our current methodologies for volunteerism and the different levels, whether it's from I'm coming to read a book to I'm going to be an assistant coach, and so forth. And just so we have a really good understanding and we can seek feedback if we need to tighten things. I agree with Ms. Moran. There's the variety of pieces of liability that if we don't consider them now, it could come back and get us. And I'd prefer to be on the proactive side on that. But if President Zion, we can talk about as we agenda set, but I think that's something I'd like Mr. Nuanez and his team to put together for us.
I think
on
that
one.
sounds like a great idea.
President Zaidama, also, just so that you all are aware as well, that for added protections, we've moved to outside coaches that are not part of the district. They, for communication purposes, they are now assigned a district email, and they will do all their communications through Parent Square, and have been instructed that they will not be communicating through their personal phones or personal emails with any students, that they need to use that platform to communicate at all times.
Wonderful. Thank you. Did anybody else have any questions about this? No.
So just to clarify, so our team knows our next steps, we're going to bring back the policy 202 in regards to animals in the classroom, either service animals or classroom pets. And then also bring back for you what we currently have in place that we've used at Litchfield to vet our volunteers or visitors. And then our recommendation of what that might look like in the future. Okay.
Yes, sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, and I think that concludes anything that. So we got 1 out of 3.
Awesome. Okay, we are going to move on then to the next item on the agenda. But I think I'm going to have us take like a 3-minute break before we get started because this is a long one. Thing. School letter grades. They don't seem interested. Okay. If everyone is ready, we are going to get back into this meeting and dig into assessment and accountability information. This is going to be presented by a few people as well. Looks like we're going to start with Dr. Davids.
All right. Thank you, governing board members, President Zynam and team. This is just a great conversation we're excited to have with the board. Certainly, as you see, it's titled Assessment and Accountability Update. It is going to be given by myself, Dr. Doozy, our Deputy Superintendent, as well as Mr. Owen, Director of Assessment and Accountability. Of course, Brian likes to share his particular department's mission and vision. And you can see those 3 bulleted points there that I think are real significant to the conversation tonight, ensuring that we have work that's aligned to state standards and our expectation, that we ensure that our teachers and staff have the professional development they need to understand and use the data that's at their fingertips, and of course, that we have the best measures possible as we talk about our student achievement and our growth. Tonight's conversation is truly interactive, so please, as we're speaking tonight with Brian and Dr. Doozy and myself, interrupt as you wish. Let's get to the answers, maybe to any of the questions you have. But really, we want to talk about our current reality, where we stand in terms of our student achievement data, our students' performance, how that relates to school labels, and you will also have opportunity to learn about just a variety of variables. What I also would say is part of our current reality, and then how we hope to address some of those things. Our goal, of course, is to give students the opportunities to succeed, but also to, when we see things that aren't maybe going how they should, problem solve and find ways to make things better. So hopefully we'll have a chance to go through that tonight. And please note, certainly this conversation ties easily to the readiness aspect, creating those Litchfield learners for the future, but really student achievement is impacted by the conversation that we had tonight, from resources to governing board policy, and of course the relationships that play into our students' performance day in and day out. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Owen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Madam President, members of the board, thank you for having us here tonight. We have not presented our statewide data yet, or the letter grades, and the month of October saw both released to the public. So I have some district proficiency data, some state proficiency data, proficiency comparisons with the public file, and some measures of growth. And then, of course, we'll break down the school letter grades. We'll look at those, and then the LEA letter grade, or district letter grade. I want to frame the conversation by looking at what happened statewide. So here's a 4-year state proficiency trend by grade and content area. And you can see really the scores in 2024 are pretty flat and overall a little down. We can see decreases there, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th math, just to name a couple areas. And we saw a very similar pattern here in Litchfield. You can see a lot of stability and slightly down overall. And when we look at this grade level to grade level, what we're doing is looking across cohorts. So this is a 3rd grade group 1 year compared to another 3rd grade group the next year, compared to another 3rd grade group the next year, and so on. What we're looking for here is, no matter what the characteristics are of the student group that's entering, we want to see them leaving at high levels of proficiency. So if they're entering at a lower rate of achievement, of course, we would like to see them make more progress to leave at a similar high rate as students have in the past. We can also look at these proficiency rates as cohorts. So what I did here is I defined 3 different cohorts. We have a 2-year cohort, which is last year's 4th grade. They had 3rd grade and then 4th grade scores. We have a 3-year cohort and then 3 4-year cohorts. So want to look first at the 2-year cohort. So what we're looking at here is last year's fourth graders compared, fourth grade proficiency compared to the same student proficiency in third grade. And we will see quite a bit of stability here in these charts. Here's the second defined cohort, call it cohort 2. This is the 3-year cohort, last year's fifth graders, and their proficiency in fifth grade, fourth grade, and third grade, the 2 previous years. And again, these are the same students. This is the same cohort. And you can see a steady increase in proficiency in math. And then we have 3 4-year cohorts. I just go back to the 2021 year because we didn't have state assessment in 2020. And so we'd be skipping back to 2019. So we have these 3 grade levels that have 4 years, which is last year's grade 6, last year's grade 7, and last year's grade 8. So when we look at this, say in math, the 8th graders in 2024 showed 42.4% proficiency rate on average. And then you can see the same students the previous year in 7th grade, the previous year in 6th grade, and the previous year in 5th. That 7th grade cohort, their 5th grade math proficiency there in 2022 does jump out. That was a high proficiency year district-wide for all students that year. We saw a spike in 5th grade math in 2022. So there's some district proficiency trends. What I'd like to do now, since we had the release of the state file last month, I'd like to look at what it looks like compared to statewide. We're going to look at overall proficiency, some demographic comparisons, and I want to see district to district comparisons that I typically put together for you and the staff and community. Here's how in 2024, Litchfield proficiency compared to state proficiency. Litchfield proficiency is that yellow bar. And because Litchfield and the Arizona on average saw the same pattern in 2024, what we'll see here is that Litchfield relatively stayed in the same place statewide. Even though we saw a leveling off and slightly down here or there. On average, Litchfield's proficiency rate is more than 10 percentage points higher than the state rate, which is right in line with where it has been in the past. Some demographic comparisons, we can see in nearly every reported demographic subgroup. This all comes from the state public file. Litchfield is outscoring statewide demographics. This is ELA. And this is how math compares. And then I want to get into the district comparisons. I run 3 different comparisons. One of them is the Auditor General peer group comparison. The AG's office has identified 3 other districts that they consider to be peer districts to Litchfield. They're elementary districts and they are in communities that have a similar level of free and reduced lunch. You can see English language arts, Litchfield and Kyrene there right at 49% proficient. And in math, Litchfield and Madison are there at 44%. And the second comparison I like to do every year is just compare it to the West Valley districts. So we do have unified and elementary districts. You can see where Litchfield compares to the other West Valley districts. That's ELA and math. And then I run a comparison to all of the reported non-charter LEAs. So here are all the districts in the state rank ordered. I wanted to see compared to all of the highest scoring districts overall. Now, some of these districts have very few schools where Litchfield ranks in terms of overall proficiency. Some of these districts have many schools. As ELA and math, and I do have a summary on the next slide to show just the 3-year trend in where Litchfield has ranked with this comparison. So in ELA, really in ELA and math, Litchfield has stayed in the same place for the last 3 years. We have 189 reported districts, non-charter. Number 24, even with previous year, but in math actually sort of moved up a percentile into the top 10% of all reported non-charter districts in the state. So those are the proficiency measures, trends and comparisons, district, state, and other districts.
Can I ask a question
Yes,
before we
please.
move on?
Yep.
So from what the data that you presented so far, we seem to be in line with what is happening across the state as far as, we were pretty flat. Everyone else seems to be pretty flat. What are we attributing that to? Or what would you or anyone here attribute that to?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a really difficult thing to pinpoint. I mean, I don't think there's one thing for sure. I think there are many things, and I think there are many different things in different places. And I mean, maybe I'm probably not the best person to speak to it, but there's a lot of things that happen during a school year with staff turnover, teacher turnover, student attendance, which we have brought up.
And I know later we're going to look at that. We're going to look at the letter grades. We're going to look at what we're saying has attributed to that. But I mean, I think that's pretty specific in our district. So are we saying every district is having the same issues that we're having? And that's kind of why? Was there a change in the standards? I know they like to change the tests, all the time. And, obviously we're AASA now versus different tests before. Just trying to get a general big picture.
I mean, all of those things too, but I know that the last board meeting you presented on chronic absenteeism statewide.
Yes, so they're great questions. So I think when I go through some of the current reality, when we even analyze the contributing factors, just like Brian said, so I don't think I have a clear answer, for probably what you're exactly looking for, but I will say in my part of the presentation, I do speak to some current reality factors, and not that they're directly correlated, but definitely have made an impact. I will say, chronic absenteeism, it's not just our school. Definitely kids not coming to school consistently has impacted a lot of schools. There's also something about growth too. When you have a lot of growth, the kids, and I'll speak to that coming up in the next presentation, how that impacts your growth. But as far as Litchfield, we had less growth than we saw last year and less overall proficiency of kids moving to a higher proficiency level. So I would assume based on the letter grades and based on this, that's where other schools would be too, is that less growth and proficiency based on the state also kind of plateauing or not moving. So, but as far as drilling down into other schools' data, I really haven't spent a lot of time in their data, just ours. So,
which I understand.
Mhm.
I guess, I think part of what we should do is understand, trends in education. That I know we've done that with looking at the chronic absenteeism, and obviously we know teacher attrition is something that has impacted other districts as well. Okay, if that's where we're at, then great.
Absolutely.
And after presenting proficiency, I'd like to look at, we'll look at two measures of growth or student progress. The second one we'll look at when I talk about the school letter grades, because it's one of the components of the letter grades. But one of the ways I look at progress every year is I run the state growth report or analysis. And this is just a visual. This is how the report's constructed. And when I send it out to the principals, it's done by overall district and grade, overall school and grade, overall school and teacher. And what this shows is movement across proficiency levels from one year to the next. So these are students who have tested in the Litchfield district. So I have their test scores. They have 2 valid test scores in the same subject from one year to the next. And the way to read this is the row represents the prior year proficiency level. The column represents current year 2024. The upper left-hand corner, you see MP row, MP column. That means that 60.4% of students that were minimally proficient the previous year remained minimally proficient the next year. And that's what we'll typically see. Those are the high percentage categories. Minimally proficient stays minimally, highly proficient stays highly, and proficient stays proficient. So what I'm looking for is movement around those categories. Does that make sense? So I won't display that necessarily for you for all the grades and subjects. What I did is I just kind of took out a few areas of strength and some areas of focus. And like I said, I really focus in on moving out of minimally proficient, moving into proficient, and then moving into and staying highly proficient. So we can see ELA, for example, 81% of students maintain proficiency from 3rd to 4th and from 5th to 6th. In math, 84% of highly proficient students remained highly proficient from 6th to 7th. And then some of those category movements that are a little bit lower, like for example, only 60% of proficient students remain proficient from 7th to 8th in math. And from 5th to 6th in math, 90% stayed minimally proficient. So I'm looking for movement out of the highers and stability in the lower for areas of focus. And in the district, in about 2 weeks, well, the week right after this November break coming up, beginning December 2nd, we're opening our mid-year district benchmark, and that's going to test in science, math, and reading. You can see their grade levels up there. In my mind, this is probably the most important district data point that we've gotten back in 7 years, because it's the same test as last year. So not only can we compare winter this year to winter last year, we can also compare winter this year to fall this year, because it's the same test. And we can look at that comparison this year compared to last year. So we'll be able to tell students in the mid-year last year were at a certain place. We know how their AASA results came out. What does the group of students we have in front of us this year look like, and how does that compare? And so what I'll be looking for are what I call hotspots, which are this group, say, started higher than last year's group in the fall and are now lower than last year's group in the winter. To me, that would be at that particular grade in school, that's a hotspot. And then of course on the other side too, which are the positives, grade levels that are making significantly more progress than students did last year. So that's really all of our AASA data and the different ways I've put it together, besides one more state growth data point that I'll get into here. Are there any more questions about that and how I look at that data?
Ms. Clymer, any questions?
No.
Ms. Moran?
I do have a question. So I understand the growth analysis and that, you know, you're looking at movement between one or the other from a percentage perspective, but like when you look at the minimally proficient to minimally proficient and you're saying 60.4% of students who were in the minimally proficient stayed in the minimally proficient, How many students are we talking about there?
Well, the actual report that I give to the schools does have the percentage and the numbers in each of the categories. So when we're looking at district-wide, after matching, it's probably about 7,200 records total. So it'd be 60.4% of that. So like 440 students or so.
Okay, so it's,
Yeah, we could, I mean, I could definitely, we could do all of the numbers for each of the grades and subjects at the district level if you wanted.
because really what I'm trying to get at is how many students are we failing? Meaning we as a district failing to meet them at their place of need and teach them what they need to learn. Not that they are failing, but that we are failing them. And I think a number of students and attaching and humanizing that versus looking at a percentage, I think would be impactful to me as a board member.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, yeah, I do have those reports with exactly those numbers in them that we can share. Okay, with that, I'll move on to the school letter grades. So October 25th, school letter grades were published publicly. What I will go through here today is what was published. We'll look at each of the components because we haven't been in front of you this year yet to go through what the components are. So we'll go through those. And then how Litchfield schools and then ultimately the Litchfield district overall came out. Wanted to show you how the state defines each of these levels of letter grades. And the difference between an A and a B is A is distinguished performance, B is high performance. C, performing, adequate performance. So I'd like to go over the model components. Some of you may not have seen these before. Some of you have seen it for several years, but half of the points come from growth. We'll look at that measure of growth next. 30% of the points come from proficiency. 10% of the points come from EL, and that's growth and proficiency on the Azella. We'll look at that. And this other component, they call acceleration and readiness, which is actually a combination of several different indicators that can add up to a maximum of 10 points. And then the scale at the bottom, which was actually approved as new cut points last year. These are the same as last year. 84 points required for an A, 72 to 83.99 would be a B, and then 60 to 72 is in the C range. Adequate performance. So I'll start with the largest chunk of the components, which is the student growth percentiles. This is 50 points. And the way this is calculated, students in 1 year are grouped with similar scoring students statewide in that year. So each student then gets grouped into a peer group that scores the same as that student in that grade in that subject. Then the next year, the change in score is compared in that peer group, and then students are rank ordered based on the highest change to the lowest change. And each student is then given a percentile rank from 1 to 99 to see where those students compared in terms of growth to peer performers. Growth is divided into 3 categories: low growth, the bottom third of the peer group; average growth, the middle third; high growth, the top third. And then you can see there are additional weights given for lower scoring students. So a minimally proficient student that ranks in the 67th percentile or above in the peer group, those students in terms of point wise or how much they contribute to the overall score is weighted at twice the amount. Here is a summary of this measure of progress. We can see, so what I'm looking for here, because they're divided into thirds, 33, 33, 33, I'm looking for numbers that are either under 33% and the low growth, or above 33% or above 66% in the average and high growth. So we can see 70% of students with average or high growth overall math, and ELA. If that was just average, we'd be looking at 66% if everything's divided into a third. 50% of minimally proficient students showed average or high. We want to see that at 66 or higher. In math, in ELA, 46%. And then we can see 66% of EL and student with disabilities demonstrated average or high growth. The second component I'll go through is the proficiency component. This is worth 30 points. They calculate proficiency in two ways, and then they take the higher points of the two. So the first calculation is just 1 year, full academic year students. The second is what they call a stability weighted proficiency, where students who have been in the school for more years are weighted higher in terms of overall points. The main thing I point out here when I do this presentation at the schools is partially proficient students count toward proficiency in this calculation. So partially proficient students are weighted at a 0.6. And then on the other end, highly proficient students are weighted above a 1.0. And really what that means mathematically is if there are 10 partially proficient students, 6 of them count as proficient. And if there are 10 highly proficient students, that counts as 13 proficient students. So it's pretty common in some subgroups and some places to see that percentage be over 100%.
Sorry, real quick. Why is it, I mean, like, you're not gonna know the answer, but 0.6, 1.3, that math doesn't math.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they came up with the value for the weight. But my point here is I always tell the schools when I'm presenting this and explaining how this is calculated, the largest jump is from minimally proficient at 0 to partially proficient at 0.6.
That's true. Yeah.
So we want to move students, of course, across the spectrum, but minimally proficient students are going to contribute the most in terms of the
It just seems like you're not getting as much value or as much credit for a highly proficient as you are a down for a minimally proficient.
Yep. I suppose that's to try to offset the demographic disparity school to school, so that schools with higher concentrations of lower scoring students can try to even out the difference between those schools and schools with high concentrations of high scoring students.
I mean, but your number is still going to be, it'll be, there might be a bigger gap, but they're still going to meet a threshold that's already established that 0.6 can achieve them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just was wondering.
So they do calculate that 2 times and then take the higher of the two. In most of our schools, those 2-point outcomes out of 30 are very close. In some schools, the stability proficiency is higher slightly. In some schools, the 1-year proficiency is higher. And that varies year to year at the same school. So that was out of total of 30 points. Next component, EL. This is 10 points. This EL component for 10 points is only in using Azella test scores. So there are 2 components worth 5 points each. Azella proficiency, which is a reclassification, and growth on the Azella test, which is movement across proficiency levels. There are schools in the state that don't have enough EL students, so this is not an evaluated component. So those schools have 90-point scales. All of ours have 100-point scales. There's a couple of highlights for EL to show how well they did last year. The average growth is 11 percentage points here above the state average. And the average proficiency rate or reclassification rate was about almost 7 percentage points higher than state average overall. And a student that reclassifies or scores proficient actually gets counted twice. That student gets counted for growth, moved to proficiency level, and for being proficient. Is my point here when I talk to the schools about that slide. And then the last component is worth 10 points. This is several indicators in this acceleration and readiness. Let's see, for those schools that have 8th grade in math, they can get points for increasing percent highly proficient and decreasing percent minimally proficient. If they have 3rd grade in ELA, they can get 5 points for decreasing the percent minimally proficient. And then we have a reduction in chronic absenteeism rate. And then the subgroup improvement. So this is up to 26 individual groups. Every subgroup that has enough students to be evaluated for a school. Any improvement from one year to the next, and again, partially proficient students are included at 0.6 in this calculation, is 2 points. So this maxes out, this indicator in this component maxes out at 6 points. So 3 subgroups at a school out of 26 must show improvement. So almost all schools get these 6 points. Here and there, we'll see some that don't. And then that last component worth 2 points. This is not an academic indicator. This is for special education students that spend 80% of the day or more in a mainstream gen ed classroom or setting. So with all those components, I know that's a lot of information and it's not easy to see up on the screen. This is how each of the schools' points came out in each of the categories. We have, well, I also throw in percent tested because if it falls below 95%, that we can get penalized for that, but we are never lower than 99% really in most places. Proficiency points, growth points, EL points, acceleration readiness points, total points, and then the bonus points. And bonus points are for science proficiency. If it's at or above the state average, that's 1.5 bonus points. If it's more than 1 standard deviation above the state average, that's 3 bonus points. And then there are up to 2 bonus points for the percent of the whole student body that is on an IEP or a student with disabilities. That's to give some extra points for schools that have a high incidence disabilities population. So up to a total of 5 bonus points. I do want to point out there are 3 schools on here with asterisks. There might be a 4th, but I'm working with that principle right now. Those are schools that we are appealing. We're going to appeal the letter grade based on a couple of things that I'm going to talk about right after this slide. So overall in the district, right now there's 7 A-rated schools, 6 B-rated schools, 2 C-rated schools. And I want to talk about some highlights. So all of these comparisons are schools in the state that were evaluated on a 100-point scale. So we do have schools that were evaluated on a 90-point scale, but I'm filtering 100-point scale and non-charter and evaluated with the K-8 model. So not compared to the high schools. That's a total of 884 schools in that public file. We have 1 Verrado Heritage, all 50 growth points. 4 schools are in the top 10% of schools in the state. Golden Soto in the top 3%. 7 of 15 received all 10 EL points from the language assessment, and 11 of 15 received bonus points for science. So I just mentioned this briefly, but there are 3 schools that we're submitting appeals for, and they're for adverse testing conditions. One of them, of course, was, well, kind of a construction accident, but it was a couple of classrooms were damaged during scheduled testing, which was a severe disruption. There's another legal issue during the test window, which caused a significant disruption. And then there's one more school that I'm appealing due to a family emergency with the specialized staff member dedicated to the instruction of EL students that she had to miss most of the school year. And so what really my burden is to talk about the event, show when it happened, then show documentation to prove that it actually happened, and then show test scores to show something had an impact on scores this year. And I wholeheartedly believe that those things had impacts on not student learning, but students' ability to demonstrate on that test in that environment. And then the fourth, what we're looking into is a possible incorrect data appeal, but I don't know. I'm just waiting to hear back from her. I sent her some data last week. And that has to do with chronic absenteeism and chronic health, actually. This is the timeline. It will close 5 p.m. this Friday. But then, so once that happens, a new public file will be published, and then all the schools in the state that have appeals submitted for them, their published letter grade will turn to what you are, I guess, unrated. And then appeals committee will make recommendations end of January, and then within the next month, they'll post final grade letter or final letter grades with any changes in letter grades. All of the letter grades that we're appealing up 1 grade. Any questions on the school letter grades, components, data,
Ms. Clymer?
appeals?
Yeah, I have questions, but I want to wait until the end because I think some of the things that Dr. Doozy is going to go through might address some of those or have a different conversation. So.
Okay.
Ms. Moran?
I'm going to go ahead and ask one question now. So one of the things that is a component of the scoring process is readiness, which you have on a slide, acceleration and readiness, 10 points max for that category. A couple of our schools did score highly. Some scored lowly. One of our keystones is readiness. So does our keystone of readiness match up with what ADE calls readiness?
For these particular components? Oh, readiness district-wide is reading for 3rd grade? Okay. Yeah.
Well, I guess like as a parent, when I say, oh, their keystone is readiness, I think, well, the state's measuring readiness and my school got a 2. So what does that tell me about what Litchfield's doing for their student population?
Yep, you're not wrong. Exactly. So readiness is a score that schools get based on improving that 3rd grade score of minimally proficient so that it decreases. So as long as you have a decrease in the amount of students, it's not comparing cohorts. It's last year's 3rd grade. This year's 3rd grade does better than last year's 3rd grade. So that's how you get the points for readiness. You are correct that it could be in that pillar as that we are preparing students from grade to grade, and we want to move those 3rd graders out of minimally proficient. 3rd grade retook the test that didn't score. They're required to take the test over again now. And I believe all but how many? You just said a couple. So all but 1 passed the ASA test after summer. So during the summer testing, because that's part of the not No Child Left Behind, part of the Move On with Reading is that students that score minimally proficient have to be intervention and then tested again. So all but 1 student got out of minimally proficient in the 2nd attempt to test in reading for 3rd grade. So you're absolutely right. That is a focus for our principals as part of their scorecard. And then acceleration is 8th graders achieving better and highly proficiency than the year before, and better lowering the minimally proficient students in 8th grade math. So K5s only have the opportunity to get it for 3rd grade. 6-8 only have the opportunity to get it for 8th grade. K-8s have both opportunities to get points from both areas. So there is an advantage from the state's perspective to being a K-8 versus not being a K-8. So absolutely targeting those students that are minimally proficient, especially those kids that are right on the cusp of what skills are they missing, what gaps do they have, so that we raise them. So when principals look at their goals for their grade levels with their grade level teams this year, that started this year, where each grade level looked student by student and determined, okay, what is our goals? How are we going to measure it? What specific students are we going to move? Focusing on things like that. So raising that minimally proficient from the year past, raising that 8th grade, lowering the minimally proficient, from the year past, and raising that highly proficient, because we know that is a measure that's used for the school rating. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
I think it does, but so I guess my concern is not so much of what's being used for the school rating, but we should be focusing on that anyway. Like that's what we should,
Absolutely.
reading in 3rd grade is critical. We all know that. That's why the state's measuring that. Promoting kids out of 8th grade being more proficient than not, is the last chance that we get with them. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around what we maybe have done in the past to try to take advantage of the scoring system or use the scoring system in our favor versus what is the reality of the results that we're seeing. Because to me, the letter grade isn't the be all end all. It's, are we servicing our students?
Absolutely. And the whole goal is we want to raise student proficiency and we want to raise their growth. Students that are scoring minimally proficient, if they're in that bottom tier of minimally proficient, they could have great growth, but not move out of minimally proficient. So that's why the state has the growth formula, not just the proficiency, because that's a big leap for some of our kids. 13-14% of our students are behind grade level because they actually have an IEP for the reason their standard deviations below grade level. Those students on the ASA are not going to show the same growth as a student that is at grade level that has, doesn't have a disability. So, but we have work to do simply. I mean, I'm not going to stand up here and make excuses or reasons. Like, bottom line is we have to increase student proficiency on grade level standards, and we have to ensure kids are growing, and maybe they won't grow out of a specific category, but they need to be showing growth for their own individual achievement from where they started the year with us or started the year before in ASA to where they end up at the end of the year. So,
okay, thank you.
Ms. Wallace, did you have any questions? Sorry, where I moved on. I went down.
No, thank you.
Oh, Mr. Owens.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but, in looking at the numbers and the scores and the grade levels, the grades, everything like that, there's 2 lines of thought, I think, when it comes to these kind of, you teach to a test, you play the game, or you just do your best and the cards are going to fall where they do, where they fall, because metrics are metrics. But every day I'm confident that the people up here, the teachers in the classrooms, the administrators are striving to do everything they can for the minimally proficient, the non-proficient, whatever level it may be, to make sure that kids get what they need. And so I'm confident that accountability is going to be taken for these grades, whether it be good or bad or room for improvement. And knowing that we're always going to just strive to keep doing better. And so I don't really have any, it is weird, like the metrics and all the numbers, because I don't think it's necessarily reflective of reality, but I don't know what I'm saying really. And just that, like, I know everyone's working really hard, and I know they will continue to work really hard.
I don't have any questions either, but I will echo what Mr. Owens said, in that I know as the parent of a kid that's minimally proficient and has not ever moved out of there, but I know the growth that she has made in this district is phenomenal. And so I agree that this is one test, one thing, and yes, some people are going to look at it and they're going to make a snap judgment about our district. And that's really sad for them, because if they don't come here and see what we're actually doing for students, then their kids are the ones that are going to miss out. But I do agree, right, that we need to just keep doing what's best for kids, and that's the best we can do. And I don't want to see our teachers start teaching to a test, and I don't want to see us gaming the metrics. I just want us to do what is best for students every day, like we are going to continue to keep doing and like we have been doing. So
So the last section I want to get into here is just the LEA letter grade for the overall district. This is based on just an unweighted GPA, given all of the letter grades that the schools in the district receive. Average them out, just a standard GPA. A is 4 points, B is 3 points. And then they round up whole number from the 10th. So 3.5 GPA rounds up to an A for the district. 2.5 to a 3.49, it rounds up to a B. The current letter grades average out to a 3.33 GPA for Litchfield, which falls in the B letter grade range overall. A highly performing district. Questions about that?
Ms. Clymer, any questions?
No.
Ms. Moran?
No.
Ms. Wallace?
No questions, but based on this, I'd say it's more like a B plus.
It is.
Mr. Owens? No questions, but because we're appealing 3, right? That
Maybe. Yep.
maybe 4, that would, if those all go through, that will change our letter grade for this.
Yeah, so if all 3 move up a letter grade, then the overall district average GPA would be a 3.53.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all of that information. We know it's a lot to put together.
Now you're gonna leave me up here by myself. Just kidding. All right, President Zaidema, governing board members, thank you for allowing me to come tonight just to present some data of the current reality and what's next. We know that some of this, well, a lot of this data is not where our passion lies and what we want to see as an ultimate outcome for our district. So what is our current reality? I call it today's news, our level of events, right? And then what's our vision and our desired future? So looking at Litchfield, what are some impacts? And again, I'm sharing this with you not to say that this is correlated exactly to why the decline or the things that Brian presented today, but more just assessing where we are at and where we should be putting our efforts moving forward. So first, I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but as I already shared at my last presentation, just the overall 27% rate of chronic absenteeism, definitely seen an increase over the last 10 years. I also wanted to share with you a couple different graphs. This graph is about teacher attrition. So we looked at specifically just certified staff, and we're working on classified staff next, but certified staff, we looked at site by site, how many of the teachers either left the school, and if they left the school, did they also leave the district? And so looking from 2022, 2023 to 2023, 2024, and this would be impactful because this is last year's attrition. You can see all the way up as far as leaving the site. We have, some districts that experienced up to 50%, all the way down to, below 5% attrition. If we look at the current reality of what we're facing this year, looking from last year to this year, how many teachers left the school site and how many of those teachers also left the school district, we have moved from 19.83% attrition from leaving a school site to 31.65% leaving a school site. So going into this school year as a district, our district has experienced 31.65% attrition by the school site. We could look at by district because that would say, okay, the teachers are moving to other campuses, maybe wanting a new culture or a new experience. But I wanted to focus on school site because every time that you move people around or they choose to move around, you experience that whole new teaming, right? You have to norm and then you have to, storm and then perform. And so every time that you have a new team member, you are going to have some setbacks. So current reality that we're facing as we move into this year is that we do have more new teams than we've ever had in the history of Litchfield.
Can I ask a question on that data point?
Sure.
What number or what would the correlation be of the changes that we made, meaning School 17 and LTH? Did we take that out of here? Because that's an anomaly in and of itself.
Yes, I did not remove that from here. The reason why I didn't is because this still is current reality and it's going to be impacting our schools. So that's the reason why I chose not to remove it. If I remember right, I think it was in the 20s. Jen, do you remember how many people we had on the board? I think it was in the 20s, but we can get that data for you. But I intentionally chose not to remove it because no matter what, this current reality is more about what the schools are facing as far as bringing teams together to collaborate and to achieve together.
Yeah, and I understand that. But one of the things that I'm looking at from a board member's perspective is what are we doing that's causing this? Or what are we not doing that's causing this? And when I look at, we chose to move people or ask them to move or opened opportunities for them to move. If we remove that from this data, then that would be a more apples to apples comparison of who is truly leaving the school site. Because again, you didn't say the district, you just are saying the school site, of their own, volition.
Yeah.
Versus.
Absolutely. And we
that.
can definitely present that in a different way at a different time. But the purpose of why I'm presenting it here is just to show the current reality of how teachers moving sites will impact collaboration. So that's just the current reality. So how can we surround them with support and expectations and love and all the things that we need to provide them with to make sure that they can get up and running as a successful team.
Okay.
So-
And are there any pros to that sort of movement, or is it all just cons?
There can be pros. I mean, they're not necessarily quantifiable, but maybe different people bring out different things in you, right? So some people can bring out the very best, some people not so much. So yeah, that's another important thing is that some of this numbers of leaving the school site were individuals that maybe took an opportunity and a different role because it was a promotion opportunity.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily an attrition. Yeah. Yeah. So it's not necessarily attrition, like a measurement of like that we've used to say, what are we doing wrong? Or what can we do to keep people to stay? I will tell you that we decided on the employee survey engagement, we actually added some questions. One was about opportunities for kids, because one of our success criteria is increase the opportunities for staff. So getting their feedback on increasing the opportunity. And we also asked them two questions about why do you stay at Litchfield? What is it about? So we have a rank order list of things that we think may be impacting them. And then we also have an open-ended question. So, and I know HR is also working on revamping our kind of exit interview. So when people leave the district, we can gain that information. But we wanted to really look at, instead of asking people that already have made the decision to leave, why don't we ask the folks that are here and loyal and working hard for us, why are you staying and how can we replicate that for
Got it.
others?
I have a question here too. I mean, I think leaving the school site, now leaving the district, we have less control over that because if they're going someplace else, then they don't want to work here anymore for whatever reason, or they're leaving the profession altogether. But we do have more control over the school site movement. And if we are seeing that it is having a negative impact on our students' growth and proficiency and the teamwork of our staff, then that's something that we can control, right?
If we post it internally, I'm not sure if there's positions available and a teacher wants to move. I don't know. I'd have to research that more, but as far as like, equity of employment opportunities.
Yeah, and I'm not saying
So-
we would say no to everybody. I'm just saying if we are seeing that that is causing major upheaval in
Mhm.
classrooms and things like that, I mean, I think that we just need to look at that from an HR perspective holistically. And I mean, we did that earlier this year where we had to balance what was best for students in the classroom and what was best for a teacher's growth in terms of that. So it's not not in black or white, right? It's not, you can do it now or you can never do it. It's, can you do it now or can you do it later? Or, something like that. So I mean, I just think that we do have some control over this because we are creating that movement internally.
Definitely. And I would definitely comment the movement like later on, right? Like once we have our rosters established for our staff, to have our staff move from one site to the other, that's definitely something HR is looking at, because just the situation that you just explained, so that we're not in that situation again.
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, I know you guys are doing this specifically too, but in terms of leadership roles, if we're seeing 40% of steep people that are leaving a school site and going someplace else, there's an issue there, right? I mean, there's an issue with the leadership at the school or something of the management of that site, because they're not leaving the district. They're just leaving that site for
Absolutely.
some reason. So I know you guys are working through that, but I'm saying there's
absolutely.
other things that we could
Yep.
do to change that.
yeah,
Okay.
because the data tells a story, right? And so we need to figure out what the story is. So absolutely. Current reality, again, we would look at the end count of our district leadership. This is admin cabinet and all of our directors, operation and educational, just a 3-year overview. Attrition rate was 38% in 2022-23. Moving into 23-24, it was 60%. Going into this year, it's 35%. The reason why it's increased, because I know that that's a question, like what district directors in 2022, 2023 is when we added the director of school safety. And then going into this year is when we added the assistant director of transportation. Looking at principalship, because we know the current reality, the experience of a leader does have impact on student achievement and culture of a school system. So 69% of our principals right now have less than 5 years of principalship. And then 19% currently going into this year, it's their first year. Also looked at how do teacher absences impact. We know we looked at student absences, but also, where are we at? What's our current reality of our teachers being at school with our kids, teaching them? And we understand teachers need their days. We understand teachers get sick, go on vacation, have reunions, weddings. We get all of that, but it's still a current reality, and it does impact the classroom when they're not there. So looking at 2022-23, you can see our total absent count, and then how many absences were filled with a substitute teacher, and then an overall percentage of coverage. And then last year, total number of absences, and then how many were filled. So actually last year, we were able to fill more absences than we did the year before. So it'll be interesting as we move into this year, how many absences we have, how many were filled, and then what percentage we're at. So definitely an increase in teacher absences. Student mobility is also something that I track, or our team tracks pretty closely. This is important because Brian had shared with us, there's that proficiency where they take the highest score, depending if you're 1 year in the school, 2 years in the school, 3 years in the school. And as Brian said, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference for most schools because they're so close in the number, but it does have an impact on some of our schools if they have a high mobility. It also is differentiated if you're a K-5 or a 6-8 or a K-8, because a K-5 will never have the opportunity to have, more than 2 years, maybe 3, maybe 3 years with a smaller group of students. A K-8 is going to have those same, could potentially have 3rd through 8th their whole time. So we've asked the state like how, if they're ever going to look at that, how they can, for 6/8s or K5s, and they really didn't have a lot of solutions. They just said, that's just how it's set up for K8s. But the mobility, just looking at overall, this is just 2022, 2023, 23, 24, as far as looking at those students that either started with us late or left us early, or were just there for 1 year. Also, just tracking the current reality of our English language learners. This just shows you by grade level for the last 3 years, how many students are identified as EL. And we have seen an increase. The biggest increase was actually from 2022-23 to this year. That's important when you talk about, what are the factors that may have impacted the EL points for some of our schools, is if you had brand new EL students, they had less direct EL instruction to show more growth. But overall, our EL, coordinators and the staff working collaboratively have done great with our EL students, but just something to definitely consider, since in that year we did go up quite a few students. Another good point too. So again, another kind of disparity between a K5, a 6/8, and a K8. A 6/8 only has 6/8 kids for EL, 3/5 kids for EL. K8s have 3/8. So, and so if you have a successful program, you're going to get more points being a K8 than you will the other type of structures that we have in the district. Again, not trying to play the number game with the rating, but just current reality, right, of how structures impact how the state decides to calculate that. Also looking at our district-wide free and reduced lunch rates, looking at 2022-23 where we were with 32.73%, moving into 2023-2024, it was pretty stable at 33%. Going into this year, we have seen a growth in serving that population and providing that service to them. So 40.39%. As Brian already shared with you, due to the adverse testing conditions, we are appealing 3 of our schools in addition to the 4th that he mentioned. Significant growth in students. This is one of the factors that I just wanted to say is current reality. When you have a lot of growth in 1 year, those students are now grouped with a different peer group. And just like Brian explained, then they're put in thirds, right? The high growth third, the medium growth, and the low growth. So a lot of our schools got the max points last year for 50 points. You will see it drop after you have a big growth, just statistically. So that's another factor that could account for less growth points. But again, not making an excuse, we need to get our kids to grow more, right? But understanding that when you have those kids that originally had such high growth, now they're in a new student group being compared to their peers to figure out the growth for the next year. So, and then as a district, we have improved all schools to work through all stages of the PLC. That's something that we've been really proud of as far as identifying what it is and what we should be doing as the work in the professional learning community. Now it's time to focus on the quality of those stages. So we're actually moving that direction come this January versus just saying this is the stage. We're actually going to give feedback and track where the quality of that stage is, not just that it's present. So what's next? I kind of gave you a little preview to that. What's next? So this is the heart of the work. Everything that we're doing is going to be operationalized in the strategic plan using the scorecard for each site, department, and admin cabinet. So we had these results, not the school letter grades, but the proficiency and the growth. We've had them with principals. We've worked through them. They've established goals around them. Also, data analysis and next steps have already been broken down by each site based on the results. Specific goals and action steps have been identified by the sites, the sites guiding coalition. So it's not just the principal, it's the principal and the voices of all the teachers that come together, and those grade level goals. That's a change this year too, where each grade level wrote their own goal around student achievement and what they wanted to achieve with kids based on where kids are at and where they want them to be at the end of the year. Schools are going to be adding that chronic absent goal. And just like our student achievement goal, that chronic absent goal is a SMART goal as a baseline. It has what measures we're going to be using and then where we want to end up. Also, high impact teamwork. We started this work last year with our highest achieving or our teams that made the highest impact on student achievement. And then really looking at tier 1 instruction is what we've identified across the board is where we need to start. We can't intervene ourselves out of a tier 1 struggle. We have to reach more kids with best instruction the first time. My boys, I used to say, you have to be a first time listener. And in this case, we need to focus on kids mastering things the first time that we teach it. So really looking at those instructional strategies we're using in tier 1 so that the first time kids are getting that instruction, they're getting the best version and the highest opportunity to succeed and not have to get intervention. So that way we have less students needing that extra support. And we can move quicker, right? If we get more people, more kids to achieve. Also, the addition of the Title IX and Legal Compliance Coordinator. This addition has allowed admin cabinet members to really focus back on the academic success to support for leaders. The District Guiding Coalition provided are providing school sites with custom support to address drops in proficiency growth and other areas of performance. I think Governing Board Clymer, you were saying about how, each school looking at each data and knowing where they're at. And that's exactly what this is about. The custom support is about that particular campus. And we drill down into their data and we meet with the principal and the instructional coach. And we talk about, what they need as far as support from the District Guiding Coalition and how we can plug into the campus to really help them support their teachers and support their students. And then creating and implementing a measure to assess the quality of the PLC stages, not just the fact that you are at the stage, but actually coaching through how to get better at that stage, providing support and future professional development. Also, the report card committee work is about to get started to strengthen communication of student mastery of state standards. We have to start with the way that we assess and the way that we record that assessment and the way that we provide that feedback to the kids on where they're at with our measures we're using and the way that we communicate with the families on those measures. And then we can start the report card work. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, but really making sure that the feedback that families and students are getting is moving them so that they really understand where they're at their level of the mastery and they know what they need to work on next. So, and that really gets into the students owning their learning and parents really understanding how to help their student at home. So that's a big project that's going to take us a little while, but I'm excited. Katie, our Director of Teaching and Learning, is leading that project. We're going to continue to focus on curriculum implementation and professional development to get the most out of approved resources. We have some outstanding resources for our teachers. And so now we really need to make sure that they are the content experts of that curriculum, that they feel comfortable with it, that they understand how to use it. So really making sure it's not just about they use the curriculum, but are they using that curriculum with the intention and the rigor that that curriculum is supposed to provide? That we're not watering it down or maybe doing the thinking for the kids when that's not really what the curriculum is telling us to do. Implement strategies to build content experts across grade levels and content areas. So really building our teachers content experts, which is part of the Litchfield Learner. Building leadership capacity, example Leader in Me, our Guiding Coalition work, Future Leaders Academies, also looking at how we can create a mentorship program for our experienced teachers that are really paving the way for our new baby teachers and our teachers that are maybe emergency certified or going to the Aspire program or just brand new to the profession. How can we use our teachers that show such great strength in their strategies to really lift them up as mentors? The implementation of the new matrix with higher behavior expectations. That was a big focus of last year that we heard from the surveys is the behaviors were really getting in the way. So implementing that with fidelity, and we've already made adjustments based on what we've learned. You've seen that in the Friday update, some of the things that we've we've changed and tweaked just to make sure that we are keeping those high behavior expectations. And also making sure kids learn, right, the skills that they're missing that got them there in the first place. And then identifying that cascading evaluation instrument and revising that performance pay. That's going to be an important part, we believe, in our next steps of the work that we have to do. And then last but not least is begin building those I can statements for the Litchfield learner so that we are specifically targeting those skills that we said that we want all kids to have from grade to grade and to be ready for high school. I will stand for any questions or comments that you have.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any questions or comments?
I actually don't have any questions, just one comment. I think that we can sit here and pick apart the research and the data and all of the proficiency growth and the readiness scores and all of that stuff. And all of that is really important. And yeah, I can tell that you guys have done that and will continue to do that and pulling out any nuggets you possibly can find. What I wanted to hear and what I'm looking for, I think as a board member thinking about where do we go from here, is the accountability and the identification of these are the things that we're doing that are going to make the most impact. And that's exactly what these last 3 slides have done, right? Is saying, we're not saying that we're perfect. We've got a lot more work to do and we've identified these areas in which to do it. So, as a parent who has had kids go through this district and kids that are still in public schools, I don't ever expect perfection from public schools. I don't ever expect perfection from my own kids, but I do expect for them to get better when we've identified gaps or deficiencies. And so I was looking for, we got some news that we didn't like. We got some news that maybe we didn't expect and doesn't feel like represents who we are as Litchfield. But the real meat of it is, what are we going to do about it so that next year and 5 years from now, it looks different? And in my mind, you have done that and at least laid the groundwork. So now let's get to work.
Yeah.
Ms. Moran.
Okay, so I have really kind of 2 points to make. My first point is what is giving me hope from this is knowing where we have been and knowing where we are today. So as a board member, I have more insight, I believe, than ADE as to what our actual results are. So when I look at, especially this work, kind of next steps section, I can see the improvements that we've made. First of all, we're being very clear, not only with each other, but with our teachers and staff about what the expectations are. I think we're more clear than we've ever been on that. I think we are more agile. Very difficult to be agile in the public school setting and the government-based setting, but I think we have a ways to go, but we are more agile than we ever have been. I think an example of that is giving principals the choice of what staff they need at their campus, rather than being one size fits all. I think that's helpful. But I think more than anything else, having the systems in place that we have been building, although I would love for you to say, oh, we have 3 things that are directly correlated to student success and ADE grades, and then we could just concentrate on those. We don't have that, but we have a lot of things we think might or should positively impact those things. And some of the things that, during this conversation are PLCs. We know we've made progress in that. We know we have more progress to be made, but we have made big improvements, and that should impact student success. Same thing with the tier 1, going back to basics. We were so concerned with filling the gaps from COVID that we put a lot of our eggs in the tier 2 and tier 3 basket. And so I think it's perfect to come back and revisit that. I love the high impact teams, sharing best practices. All of those things are great. I think all of those systems are going to help to see that improvement that's happening. Now, where I want to go with that next is, one of the things that came out of the pandemic was burnout. And we know teacher attrition is an issue. So are we asking too much of ourselves as an admin cabinet and our teachers to be successful in all of those systems?
Well, we're surveying our staff. And so we're going to get their perception, right, of how things are going. So I will be able to come back and provide to you their insight as far as how they're feeling supported. They have the resources they need. So I do know, I do hear from the principals that they do say they're overwhelmed in paperwork. And so really looking at what are the things that have to be in place legally, right?
Mhm.
What are the things that are best practice? Because we've collectively agreed that that's what we're going to do as a staff. And then what are the things that maybe we need to let go of, right? And so those are conversations that definitely Jen, Ben, and I have with principals all the time
Okay.
because we do want to find that balance. So I think the surveys will give us a really good insight on, with all the changes that we've made up to this point, what is the perception of the field? How are they feeling? Do they feel supported? Do they feel that this work is doable? And do they feel successful? That's one of the questions on the survey. So
Yeah, for sure. Because as much as we can talk about teacher pay and your coworkers, I mean, if you feel like you are successful at your job, that goes a long way as well. And they can see the growth in the kids and things like that. Okay, my only other question is more practical as to where we are today. So what is our messaging to parents and who will be doing that messaging based on what our scores are right now? I know we're appealing some things, but parents are seeing this.
yes.
And so what are we doing to address where we are?
Sam, do you want to speak to that? I know you worked on a script and a letter for schools.
Yeah, we've been messaging out to, the plan is to kind of just get out there, where are we with the school grades, and kind of put it in the context of what they understand, when we start talking about tier 1, tier 2s, and all the education speak, they kind of get lost in that. So we're just trying to make sure that they understand that, even though there's been some decrease, that it's, we also want to point out the highlights that, even though we've lost some ground this year, we're still, I mean, when you look at the data, we're still, in comparison to our peer districts, we're still up there, we're still riding up there. So we want to just make sure that they understand that, and with everything, that there's always room for improvement. And we are a district of continuous improvement. So we're always looking to find those ways that we can make sure that they understand that.
Ms. Moran and President Zimer, just to add to that, and I'm going to sum that up, Sam's comments with one word: transparency. We made a decision about 2 weeks ago, once all that information started to come out, to be nothing but transparent. To Bridget's point, those grades tell a story, but that's not the complete story, which is why we're here tonight. We will certainly, once the appeals process is in place and done, and I'm just feeling super positive about that, we'll again push the information out so people know that, and to use the terms that I used in my little video, that Litchfield Elementary remains a high-performing district. It may not have that A label right now. That's coming. And as you see, we are focused on bringing it all back, but just being transparent.
Okay. And I'm not as concerned about the district label. I'm concerned about, I'm a parent at Dreaming Summit, and now my child is at, I mean, I know we're appealing it, but right now, the current reality, to use your terminology, is my child's now at a C school. So I would like an explanation from someone. What does that mean? I mean, from my
Yes.
principal or someone to tell me, what does that mean in plain English?
Yes, Principal Hill and I both, and with Sam's help, we worked on a letter specifically for that community. So that letter's already been sent out in simpler terms to make sure that our families understand what that means and the work to be done moving forward. So that letter has already been shared with those families in particular.
Okay. And obviously we'll revise that if the letter grade gets revised, but I just want to make sure that our parents are getting some sort of reassurance about really the meaning behind that.
Ms. Murray, and to also add to that, with help from Mr. Owen and Sam and Yardley, principals are armed with what we call them just speaking points that they can have. They're armed with the knowledge to have quality conversations with their families.
Okay.
So if there's any family out there that's wondering, as they've heard us tonight, or they saw a poster or saw something in the newspaper, certainly invite them to campus just to have that conversation and really, very kid specific, but how are we impacting and helping their child? They're welcome to just pop by the office and have that conversation.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I will just reiterate that I have trust in this team I have trust in our teachers that we will continue to improve and we will take that constructive criticism, if you will, from ADE, and we will learn from that, and we will be, as Sam said, a district of continuous improvement. So keep up what we're doing.
Ms. Wallace.
I just echo what Kim said as far as I appreciate everything that we're doing to move forward. I think we're kind of joking, but I think the obvious answer is we just become K-8 schools, all of them. So that would just be a quick fix. And it would be easy for everyone involved. Obviously, I'm joking, but we were just joking about how the data in all ways supports K-8 schools. So
Ms. Wallace, just for fun, we might have a team member over here who's getting ready to have the official doctorate title to his name, and it's all around the K-8 model.
well,
Not that that's where we're headed,
he's just
but
going to be
there is a
ready.
data set that's out
So you're
there.
gonna have to present your whole to us then, your whole.
Yeah.
All right.
I already said that to them before, that we might have to do that, even if I don't like K-8s. But Mr. Owens, did you have questions or comments?
Yeah, I want to thank Board Member Clymer for adequately saying what I tried to say earlier when I was rambling before this presentation. The gist of it being that I know there's accountability, and I know that you're already identifying steps and ways to improve those scores, and that every day the goal is to educate our children to keep them safe. And so I'm confident in this administration, the cabinet, and our schools and our principals and our teachers and everybody like that. And so just to Board Member Moran's point about parents of students, right? Like, if you're concerned about the school's letter grade, how active of a role are you playing in your own students' education, right? Because I don't want to put it, thinking out loud here, right? If your child's performing well and they're doing a good job, then in the grand scheme of things, like to that student, the overall score of the school doesn't matter. But if you have a student and you're concerned about the score of the school and your child's not performing well, then take a more active role in your child's education and performance, right? Because that's going to make a difference in the school grade, but more importantly, that's going to make a difference in your child's grade. So I think when it comes down to these scores, a lot of it is ownership of your children's education. And like I talked about earlier, we can teach to a test or we can try to work the metrics, but at the end of the day, if we're doing the things every day in our classroom to teach our children the things that they need, and that's being reinforced at home, it's only going to have that much more of an impact.
So I don't have any questions, but I will say that people cannot, again, use these scores as the sole basis of how our district is doing, because we know that our kids, when they go to high school, the kids from Litchfield are successful. They are graduating at high rates. They're having high AP scores, high ACT scores. Their grade point averages are higher. They are successful when they go to high school. So whatever these test scores show, that's not the accurate picture of where our students are. And I love that we are being proactive and doing more and making sure that we are trying to address these things that came up based on these test scores. I support them mostly because that's what's best for students, regardless of what these test scores said. So I just appreciate our admin team being so proactive and already, like, we got these scores and you guys have a plan already in place, which is great because that helps me know that we can just trust you guys to keep doing what you're doing, and our kids are going to be doing great this year. And I am just very appreciative of everything that you guys have done to take ownership of what we are seeing and making sure that we're able to move forward. So thank you.
Can I ask one follow-up question?
Mhm.
So, when we go visit the schools, we always ask the school, leadership if they have what they need. So I'm going to just ask you, do you have what you need to execute this plan and the work that needs to be done to improve the letter grades?
I feel very confident that we can improve our letter grades. From a minimal perspective, do I think we have what we need to get the job done? Yes. Do I think we could maximize our resources even from our early conversation today to find ways to do a better job? The answer is yes. I think you saw with the current realities that exist, Ms. Moran, that the job is difficult to get to where we want to be, but I think with the support of governing board, with Mr. Owen's piece, with our community behind us, we're gonna get there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think that we have wrapped up this conversation. Yes. Awesome. Well, then we are going to move on now to the last section of the agenda, which will be reports. We'll start with Dr. Davidson.
Thanks for letting me stay up here, Madam President, governing board members. How about the new look? I know it's not finalized yet, but I think that blue is just a lovely color. And I know that Ms. Lundberg and her team will be back at it, spicing up our boardroom in the cafeteria here. We're excited about that. Also, just a shout out to our tech team. I know we had a little microphone problem tonight, but as you can see, we continue to lessen the amount of hazards, trip fall hazards out here by removing the cord. So we're excited about the upgrades there. Just starting off, want to also give just a great warm welcome to our continuing governing board members and to Mr. Mikes joining the team. I'm just certainly excited to continue to serve alongside you all there. As always, it's a busy time of the year, but I just want to highlight a few key items. Number one, if you haven't yet, and I'll be honest, I have not attended, but the holiday Thanksgiving feasts are happening across our district. Dr. Venerable and her team just doing great work out there at our schools. And we offered it earlier, but I'll throw it out there again for our families. If you've never attended, please find that when those feasts are being offered at the campus. It's a great opportunity just to engage at the campus level. We've been attending, and many of you have had a chance to join us, the governing board showcases. One of the things that I'm really just a fan of is how we can be transparent in those conversations, and that accountability really is there. The governing board, as well as our team, has a chance to really see how the scorecards, how the strategic plan is actualized, and how it's impacting our schools. So I always appreciate those of you that can attend with me at those showcases. And I'm going to ask Ms. Jen Ben real quick if she can provide us some data. One of the things that our new strategic plan talks about is opportunities for kids. And not too long ago, we talked about the ASU college prep opportunities for our learners, in particular in math, but there's some other opportunities for college credit. As you all know, that process ended today for registration. So I'd just like to see if she could share a little bit of data with us on what's out there.
We have 20 students who have signed up for their first college class with ASU.
Yeah.
We do have extra spots open, so we are now going to look at students who might not have been a part of this, but are identified as gifted, and we're going to offer it to them because it is not met the requirement. I think we asked for 60 spots, and so there's still some spots available for our students who might be interested.
Thank you for sharing. Just two more things. Dr. Doozy spoke to the surveys. Those went out tonight. One of the things that our administrative team really prides themselves in is not just capturing the feedback from our staff, our community, our students, but also then doing something with it. So just really want to encourage those that are getting access to those surveys to take them and share their voice. And lastly, I'm going to give a shout out to the following students over at Scott Libby: Elijah, Katrina, Natalie, Brooke, and Lucy. Mr. Nuanez and I had a chance last week to do our second version of Connecting with Carter Kids Edition, and just had a great time with the kids, some 4th and 5th graders there at Scott Libby, and I'm excited to see how that video looks. So thank you for your time, and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. We will move on to reports from the governing board members. Ms. Clymer, you can go first.
All right, the hour is late. I'm going to keep my notebook closed, so I'm only going to say one thing. I want to highlight, as Dr. Davidson did, the school showcases that we are invited to. I know it takes a lot of work for schools to prepare for those 2 or 3 hours that we're there. The kids that are involved and the teachers and all of that. So just want to shout out to Principal Harge and her team at Western Sky, who last week or the week before, I can't remember now, that we were there, and impressive as always. she is a first year principal with us, has a lot of experience elsewhere, but with Litchfield. So learning our culture and trying to, solve some problems on her campus and create an environment that is going to slow down that teacher burnout and attrition and things like that they've seen at the middle school level. So I wish her the best of luck in her team, and thank you for having us on campus. That's all I'm going to say for tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Moran.
Yes, I've got a short report too. I was able to attend the Litchfield Educational Foundation meeting on November 1st, which is always amazing to see the great innovative programs that they're coming up with and ways to help our students and staff. I was able to attend the Western Sky Middle School Showcase as well. Thank you to Principal Harge and her leadership team for an excellent day of discussion, as well as examples of high quality instruction that is happening every day on their campus. I enjoyed seeing the dedication of the staff and students. We got to talk to some students in action there. I also was able to attend the Dreaming Summit Elementary School Veterans Day ceremony, which was last week. They also had a breakfast as well, which was delicious. It was a beautiful morning of gratitude and appreciation for our military families. Principal Hill and her staff went above and beyond to honor the men and women who serve our country. Thank you to those men and women. And appropriately, I believe, I will close with lyrics from America the Beautiful by Catherine Lee Bates. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country love and mercy more than life. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Ms. Wallace.
I was able to volunteer at the end of October for our school's book fair, and I just encourage people to get involved with the PTO. I'm not particularly on the PTO, but anytime they send out signups, I sign up for as many shifts as I can do because the people that are putting them on need the help. So please get involved with your school's PTOs. Today, I attended the Thanksgiving feast at my children's school, and it was very well done. A couple things that I noticed that I hadn't noticed before, and I don't know if I was just looking at it differently, but there was principals from other campuses there, which were obviously alleviating some of the extra needed work with all the parents on campus so that the principal could socialize and whatnot. And I thought that was great. At our particular time, I saw the mayor of Goodyear there serving. The different community members that are there serving, I would love to be able to see, hear all the different people that are there, but we just thank our community members for getting involved. There were a ton of parents there, and it's a great way for them to come on campus and for the community to get involved. So I thought it was very well done, and whoever has organized and put in all that work, I know you were there. Thank you for all that you are doing for that, because I think it's a great thing for our families.
Mr. Owens.
Yeah, real quick, chronological order. Attended I got it out. Yeah, the Western Sky Middle School Showcase. Principal Harge was great. And her first year as the an administrator there from a high school. Great ideas. We talked a lot about the difference between middle school and high school. And then the next day was election day. I was at Canyon View High School and actually met her father, and I got to talk to him for a little while, which was pretty cool. Which was Tuesday. So congratulations to Board Member Zaidema and Board Member Wallace. And then congratulations to Mr. Mikes. Looking forward to working with you in January. Happy belated Veterans Day to all of our district employees that are veterans and everybody else who served. My phone went off a little bit ago for Parent Square for the parent survey. So I encourage everybody to do that. I'm assuming that if you're watching this board meeting, either live or YouTube, you're probably involved and will take that survey. And then hope everyone has a good Thanksgiving break.
Okay, I will make this quick. I attended the Western Sky School Showcase. I always appreciate getting to hear from our students. It was really nice to hear from our 2 Aspire teachers that came and talked to us about some things that they are doing to help with, I guess, behavior kind of, and just overall how to be good people. because I think that's important. And I liked the way that they were able to share the information and things that they're doing in their classroom. And you could tell that they work with middle schoolers, but in the best possible way. Like God bless anybody that works with middle schoolers, because I think they can be very difficult, but some people really have a skill for it. And these two teachers definitely have it. So I'm so glad that we have them. They're part of our Aspire program and that they are going to teach for us for a while. I also was able to attend the Dreaming Summit Veterans Day ceremony. Principal Hill does a great job. Last year she had it and it was for the Purple Heart School, or sorry, the Purple Star School that we were doing. And you said that the other day, she threw me off. So yeah, and it was all purple and everything was beautiful. And this time they went away from the purple and they had more of the red, white, and blue, but it was decorated beautiful. Everybody had a great time. It was just a great way to honor our families that are in the military by having this event for them to come to. And the kids are all proud of their parents and they love being there and they all want to take pictures at the little picture booth. So I appreciate all of our schools. I know we have a lot of campuses that put these type of events on, and thank you to any of our schools that do it, because these military families, it's just a special thing that they are sacrificing a lot, the kids just as much as the parents that are out there and serving in the military. So I appreciate that we give them that moment to honor them. And then I was also able to volunteer at the White Tanks Thanksgiving feast and serve lunch. This is my second year doing that, and it's our second year having it at their beautiful new campus. They do a really great job setting it up in there and making this really pretty little place for them to have their lunch with their families. The families come in and they're really excited to eat with their kids, and everybody's just happy to be there. And I have never seen a behavior problem there while I've been there. I've been there quite a few times. And I was told that by Principal Martinez, he wishes that we could actually see how them in action at times, because anytime I've ever been there, it's just always been calm and great. But anyways, I still had a great time volunteering and serving lunch. The kids were great. The families were great. They appreciate having that opportunity. I also was able to volunteer at Wigwam Creek, which is a whole different breed of middle school kids, but they also were super well behaved and excited to have their families there. There was tons of parents out, and the kids were all excited to eat lunch with their parents, which was nice because sometimes middle schoolers don't want to be anywhere near their parents. So I appreciated that, getting to go out and help with that. And there was lots of students that helped. They were very excited, the student council kids, to come and help serve lunch. So I appreciate them being out there and serving lunch to their peers. So those are the things that I did I'm looking forward to some things that are coming up this next month. But to end, in November, my family does the very intentional "We Are Thankful for What" every day. And so I just wanted to share my few things that I'm thankful for at this district. One, I am thankful to the veterans who first chose to serve our country and then now choose to serve our community by working with our students every day in this district. I appreciate all that you guys do for our kids. It is an honor to have you work for us. I am thankful for our teachers and our support staff who pour into our students every day and work tirelessly to help every child reach their highest potential, and that they don't see our kids as a number on a test, but as the individuals that they are, and that they help them shine as bright as they can. I also want to thank our board, both our current board and our new incoming board member. It is so nice as a parent to know that there are reasonable, level-headed people sitting up here making decisions. And as a board member that has to work with all of these people, I am very thankful that I get to work with people that I know all care about our kids at the end of the day, and that we may not all come in with the same ideas, but I know that we're all here with the best of intentions to do what is best for students. And so I am thankful that I get to work with all of you as a board. And with that, I will close out my report. Thank you to all of our administrators that sent stuff in. We know there's lots of great things happening on your campuses. There's lots of great things happening in your departments. Everybody is super busy, but we appreciate that you take the time to put these reports together for us so that we can know what's going on. Again, please, community members, read them. It's a great opening into what's happening in the district if you want to know. And with that, I'll entertain a motion from Ryan.
Sorry, before I move to adjourn, I forgot something.
Yep, go ahead.
I participated in the Apex run at Verado Elementary School, and that was awesome. And then at the end, they have the parents race, and my 6-year-old kindergarten daughter beat me through the obstacle course. I lost a shoe, so I moved to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
Having a motion from Mr. Owens and a second from Ms. Wallace, I will call for the vote. Ms. Clymer?
Yay.
Ms. Moran?
Yay.
Ms. Wallace?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
I'm a yay. Motion passes. Thank you guys for joining us.